Let's go.
All right. Right. This is episode 4 of Summoning Inside the Nines, presented by AT&T. Season 2. Guess we have to throw that in there. Because to be fair, I'm still on a webcam, so it does still look like the old days. We haven't quite moved into the future. That may be coming soon. I don't know why we're even saying that. It will be if everything goes great.
Yep.
We'll all be there in LA, so we'll see how that works out. I don't think the US government's going to hear this in the meantime and be like, deny that visa, so no problem there. Right.
We are still working on that studio. I know a lot of people are wondering, where is the studio? Why are we still doing this? The studio is currently under construction right now, and it should be done in the next couple of weeks. So at least I will be in there at that point in time, and then Thorin will be, Thorin will be there when the U.S. government decides that he is allowed to come to America.
For people who don't know, actually, this might be a funny anecdote, because it's the sort of setting, someone inside where I could tell this story, which is, as much as that sounds like a joke, the first time I actually applied for a visa to come to America and work there, which was for E-League, which is obviously literally a cable television show on TBS, like a pretty big time show where I was being applied for by the TV station, even though the role I was saying I was going to do was going and talking about Counter-Strike, which we literally, in the evidence section that you have to submit, proved through websites and articles and all the jobs I'd worked that I had actually done that for 20 years. Despite that, they still declined the visa initially and said not enough evidence to actually prove you can do what you say you can. She's like, oh, I thought, bloody hell, which Redditor was in control of visa control that day? Like, what's that? Especially because then when we just applied again, I just got it immediately, didn't I? That's almost like one of those things I've always worried about, Monty. Is, the worst thing about being like internet famous is you're only famous with such a weird cross section of people. It doesn't actually have that many benefits in life. No. And every now and then you can just have like a weird negative, like someone will just come up to you in a really sort of like cringy setting. And then it just makes it a bit weird. Like, oh, hey, guy that knows me from the internet. But I have always worried that the one area it would mess with me is I don't ever want to be like sat, like, like imagine this setting like a... like you're going for a date in a lovely restaurant. Oh, Metro D, I'll have a bottle of the house, the best red you've got in the house, Merlot or whatever. I don't know anything about wine, but the best Merlot, bring it over. And it's like, we miss you, whatever. And then as he's walking away, as he goes on the corner, you look and you just see like a little TSM pendant. I'm like, what the fuck? And then later on, you're just thinking, I've ordered the Bula base. Oh, this could go so badly. Anyway, you can use your imaginations on that one, guys. You can figure out where I was going with that. All I'm saying is, I wouldn't be that hungry anymore that night. I'd maybe just stick to the breadsticks and then get out of there.
I do think it's funny though about the visa stuff, because that first one was sort of like a Reddit mod where it's exactly the same level. It is basically just like, Reddit. Not enough evidence like they're like, well, this person has tons of experience. Well, I haven't heard of them, so therefore their application is denied. Like, what the fuck?
Do you want to know something, by the way? I'll give everyone a little bit of insight, actually, because recently, one of the things I've been doing, it's one of the reasons why, actually, even though this show was on the same time last week, I did it from my home, which is, I was back in the UK doing a CSGO tournament called Blast Premier. And as part of it, you have all this other talent there, some of whom have even worked other games. Obviously, someone who's in Overwatch, like, they're all people from CSGO generally. And the thing is, I've noticed CSGO, bizarrely, considering it is the game that has the most overlap with other games, has almost no overlap whatsoever with League of Legends. The only people I actually know that even know anything about League of Legends tend to be players who, some of the more old school players still have that mentality where if you're part of like a multi-gaming like org, you try and support the other teams in your org. It's not really that much of a thing nowadays, but back in the day, if you were in SK Gaming or whatever, and you had a Warcraft 3 team, you try and cheer for them as well if you're a CS player. So some of them know a little bit about League, but the reason I'm bringing this up is some of them, I think it was because you made that tweet where you said, like, this weekend I'm going to watch like LCS, Overwatch League, CSGO. Like, there was loads to watch, wasn't there? There was all these big marquee
No. That was just passive aggressive. I purposely did not include Overwatch League.
Oh, right. You were doing the old joke where, right, the joke, I guess, is that you said everything except Overwatch League. You're like, I'm going to watch all these big esports. Right. I see. I just edited that to be better, didn't I? I didn't see what you're actually doing with that one. Basically, it's like the joke I made where, I'll give you a quick side joke. You'll enjoy this. I just basically used the format of a Twitter poll against people. because since everyone who's done a Twitter poll knows it only lets you have 4 names, I just said who was the best Fnatic player last year. And if you can imagine why I did it, Monty, I listed all 4 positions except AD carry. And then when people were like, why the fuck is it reckless? I was like, you can only put 4 names, boys. What could I do? Like, even though that was the whole joke why I set it up, isn't it? Like, just to fuck with people. But people never get the basic jokes anyway. So the point I was going to make was when we were doing, I had some of the CS people actually start watching like some LCS VODs in the morning. I just saw them watching it in the green room as we had a couple of hours to go. And what's hilarious is some of the things they were saying, Monty, would make you crack up so much. Because the problem is the kind of person who's super deep into CS is really, I always say like, there would be a crossover into the mobile world, but they're almost certainly going to be a Dota guy. Like the sort of things that they like, and I was like, it's all about like wanting to be absolute best and just destroy other people. They like the idea that it's not like a tailored meta that you can only do certain things. And so some of the things they were saying was hilarious because it was one of those scenarios where it's like they don't read Reddit, like they're not picking up on memes and narratives that we all say. And they were actually saying stuff, Monty, like, I don't get it because when I've been watching like Dota TI, like they're doing like a lot of really interesting fights and it's like they're not afraid to fight. But in League, they would come close and then they would just back off, like, and there wouldn't be a fight, and then they'd just go back again. And you go, why would they always just go in the middle and then almost fight and then go away? And I was sat there, right, trying not to say anything as these 2 different people who were just CS people were interacting, just sitting back like fucking Jane Goodall or something when she was watching all the zips. Like, fascinating the way they live, like, because obviously I didn't want to tell them the sad truth, which is like, first of all, you're watching LCS, boys. Tune in LEC or like LCK if you want to see what you're talking about. And then secondly, yes, unfortunately in League of Legends, people are just afraid and then just have a massive fight like World of Warcraft or something.
Yeah, I do think it's funny too because a bunch of my colleagues from Overwatch League started playing League recently. I
saw a lot of them actually play it for fun, right?
It's been really funny, but having them know nothing about League of Legends and try and come in and play it, and Mr. X is out there just playing top Teemo, and it is funny to see how these people that I know very well, their personalities are like translated. Like Bren is trying to play mid lane Yasuo. It's like everything you would expect from these people is actually just manifesting.
All their idiosyncrasies just come through the game.
It's so funny. Yeah. It's pretty good stuff.
Well, actually, that's something, by the way, as a quick aside. I'm sure you can talk to it. That's one thing I've noticed has been very weird about all my time in esports, where I've gotten to know people beyond just even their persona, like who they actually are as a person, is there is a ridiculous correlation between someone's, like, what they consider their personality to themselves, how they think of themselves, what they value, what they prioritize, which qualities immediately are noticeable, and how they actually play, or if in the case of talent, do their job. Like there's like a crazy, it's like that. I almost think that famous saying that's like, I think it's from like the Hopi Indians that said like, your character is your destiny. I almost feel like it's true. If you just look at people who play esports or a talent, there's actually a decent amount of crossover on that.
Yeah, it is. I think it's really fun to see all these people play new games and then see exactly how it translates to their personality or their character, because it really couldn't have been more of a dead ringer for me in terms of what these people were playing.
Like, if people don't know, right, obviously you've said many times as someone in Insight, like, you don't play the game much, League of Legends, because it's a game you study, and obviously there's just, logistically, there's too much in the world to watch anyway, so it's not like getting to Platinum on fucking Lee Sin jungle would in any way help you understand the jungle path in more than just watching an LCK VOD. Like, it would obviously be 10 times better. But if people don't know, this even makes sense for Monty. I'll tell you why. Is one of the few times me and Monty, this is actually what weird people we are. Even though we only met each other, know each other, and built an entire relationship through a video game, we don't ever talk about video games aside from like League of Legends and esports. Like, there are no video games. But one of the few times we ever did was when Monty was telling me I had to play this game called Crusader Kings 2. And I was thinking like, I'm not really much of a single player gamer, you know, like, ever since CS, I kind of quit like 20 years ago. I was like, so what is it like? He was like, oh, it's brilliant. You can be this like feudal lord, and then all your descendants are going through the game. You're like manipulating their lives because you might have to take over them at one point in time. At the moment, I'm like fucking over my like son because he's kind of an idiot. So I'm going to marry him off to this other like papal dynasty. Like, what are you talking about? Is this a video game? Like, what? Like, I didn't even know that you were video game. My mind was actually getting blown. Like, is this a troll or something? It's like Black Mirror.
That's great.
It actually sounds mad, but like the idea that that's your type of video game, like Littlefinger the game, is mad.
It is.
Sounds
it's
good.
So
though.
true. So many of the games that I play like that, are these grand strategy games, but Crusader Kings is especially funny because it's just a feudal sandbox. So there's no winning. There's just like random outcomes.
You're also saying that it's not like you play through you're not actually playing for the story because it goes different every time, right?
Yeah, the thing
Sounds
is, like,
pretty cool,
you can choose different periods in history with real historical characters, and so the game is actually very interesting historically. Like, you can be Charlemagne if you want to, or you can just be one duke in part of the Charlemagne's empire, and so you can try and just manipulate history or take it over from within. You can be a Zoroastrian in Iran trying to pretend to be a Muslim so you don't get persecuted. Like, it's really cool.
That's pretty next level. You can even go to that level of
it's
like
crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really fun. I don't know, but it is really, really slow. However, whenever I stream it, people like it when I stream it. So whatever. It is.
Obviously,
the storylines are hilarious.
Since the whole point of that game is you can make add-ons with the SDK as well. Obviously, someone should make it where they reskin the whole concept. And you're actually trying to work through the Riot Games hierarchy. Like, you start out, because I've noticed that's the weird thing about Riot. They have like thousands of employees, and people always just start as like, I was just like friends with someone who worked at Riot, and now I'm like a game tester or something. You're like, who the fuck's this guy? And then eventually, like, you meet them a year later, and they're like, oh, I'm now on the balance team. You're like, what? All right. And then like 2 years later, they're like, oh, I get introduced as a new color commentator. You're like, what is it? What even is this system like? It's just like the Sea Org or something. Where are these people coming from? It's like Hollywood. We hear stories of people just comment, and then they're just working for some company. Someone reskin it and make the Riot version, basically.
We'll do it. Sounds great. All right.
Any other topics before bringing the guests on?
I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of LCK because of the trip that I had to London for Flashpoint. So I've seen some of the games, but not as many as I would have liked. But I did see all of LCS and LEC. So.
Well, what we'll do is that, I know we've got someone lined up for next week. In like 2 weeks, maybe we'll do like a full-on LCK episode, and we'll get like some full experts in. We'll study up on all the games, and we'll go super deep.
Sounds good. I like it.
I think it'll be fun.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to watching some of the teams.
All right. So here's what we're gonna. Also, I think it's better to do it in a couple weeks because that way we'll have more. This is the start of the season. Teams are still getting rolling, so I'd like a larger sample size before we really get involved in that, as it were. All right, so we're going to go to a quick break while we bring our guests in, and we'll be back in just a couple. All right, it's time for our Cloud Connections segment brought to you by AT&T, and we're here with Pr0lly and Amazing. Hello.
I have one question, though. So listen, Amazing actually does work right now as a coach, like the assistant coach or something at Misfits. Is that actually the title assistant?
It's a strategic coach.
Strategic, right, okay.
It sounds a bit more fancy than that,
It does. Sounds pretty good when you say that. That's like when they make automotive technicians, like you're a mechanic. Yeah. But it makes it sound like he's got like a PhD, like lab coat. Here's the question that I don't know, and I'm not. This is not even flame. I genuinely don't know this. Do you actually do anything at the moment, Pr0lly? Is this just your sabbatical period? What are you doing at the moment?
Yep, this is my sabbatical. I'm taking off.
Right. There we go. So I did the same there. He's actually just unemployed, but I made it sound like he's taking a sabbatical from that whole coaching. Trying to find who he is,
He's on the
he's got
unemployed doesn't have a good ring to it for some reason. I don't know why.
Oh, right. My apologies, Pr0lly. You're on the LCS desk. I don't watch that for these reasons. You know the way you can skip it and go straight into the VOD, like at the end of the pick bands? That's all I do, mate.
You're missing it. You're missing quality content.
It's all right. Here's the thing. I could imagine you're good.
Wait, what did you say?
I could imagine you're good on the desk. It's just some of the others. Yeah, I'm not a big fan.
He's doing a good job.
Coming from Thorin, I got really confused.
Right.
Wait, what?
No, what's good is I always give you compliments, Pr0lly, but they're always like backhanded. Like my compliments are like, "Oh, you were a pretty good coach," except for all those game fives.
Yeah.
Yeah, you seemed like you really understood how to use split pushing, except on it. It's like it's always the block that brings it back.
I appreciate that. There's balance, Yin
yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah, that's me and Monty, the yin and yang.
I don't think it's like that, but okay.
That's mainly just like two yang and yang.
two yang. So, there's no yin there.
So, okay, here's the thing, Monty. This is actually going to be a mildly trickier episode because since I actually have learned things over the years as a host, one of the things I try not to do is what I call like froscoring people, which is where what you do is you bring them onto a big talk show without having any prep before about what they're going to talk about. And then you just throw them in there like, so what did you think about the draft of these two teams in a game that you probably only half watched? And then they're like, And then the problem is, if they say anything even slightly wrong, they might just forever be tarred as like, they don't know what they're talking about, they're idiot. So now what we do now is we do actually ask them before the episode if they watch the other regions. And these two guys are watching like a little bit of the others, but they're not like studying it. They're not watching
small amount, yeah. Small amount.
So all we've got to do is we'll just do it like this. If we ask a question about LEC, it'll obviously mainly be for Amazing. If you have anything you want to jump in on, Pro, yeah, just come on in. Don't worry about that. Just get in there. But otherwise, we won't like specifically target you with that one. And likewise for LCS, if Amazing's watched the hype games, maybe he's one of those people who's like, oh, well, no, 100 Thieves did that badly, right? And, you know, maybe he wants to jump in as well. Who knows? Who the fuck knows, right? Hey, I mean, we could have a low-key sort of flame session for 100 Thieves in this one. I don't know. That's my hope anyway. But we'll see. Monty's probably a bit biased against that. So where do you want to start here, Monty? Probably with Amazing's team, I assume.
I do think we should start talking about Misfits a little bit and the expectations that were coming into the season, because there were a lot of issues with Misfits last year, clearly, where they built out this on-paper fantastic roster. It kind of got wrecked partway through the season. Then you had to bring all these other players on board, many of whom are still on the roster right now. So what has been the process from the offseason? What were your expectations coming in for Misfits this time?
So I mean, I was actually not part of the actual process of like bringing in new players, so I can't talk too much about that. But from obviously talking to the head coach and talking to Sane, like the high ups, it's basically they wanted to kind of break the wheel. You know, it sounds like kind of like a meme, but what has been happening in the EU is that every single year you have like some veterans being recycled, and the same in NA, veterans being recycled. You keep bringing the same people over and over again, but you never quite achieve something because you don't quite try to bring in like new talent completely in order to revamp the scene to a certain extent. So they came with the idea that, hey, let's bring in a couple of new players, a lot of rookies, a lot of people that have a lot of potential, and try to honestly force them into system underneath a good coaching staff. So so they want to basically like have the coaching staff be more of a dominant force and the players be more of a submissive force that can basically learn the game through the coaching staff and then see where they end up.
I have one question there. Here's the problem, right? Listen, I'm not, again, this isn't even flame. Like, you'll know when it's flame. This is just actually when I ask an honest, curious question, but it's going to sound like flame. So just in terms of context, Amazing, right? I'm thinking of two things in your career when you're saying those things. You're going like, it's a lot of recycling of the same players. Like, isn't that, don't you usually just like join a team at the end of the split and like try and help them? They're like, oh, these old junglers can't play. And then you're like, he's
beginning of split in summer.
Okay, so true. Sometimes, first of all, that is your career for the last few years. Then, secondly, the part that's the craziest to me is you're pretty famous as a player for being pretty vocal about like, I hate when they bring in all these rookies and then they try and like bring them up. You know, it's like, why don't we respect the establishment? So you're in a very interesting position in that sense now, right?
That's pretty fair to say, actually. And I'm honestly, I am pretty vocal about it because I, in most cases, don't believe in rookies because the things that they have to learn, a shit ton. And they're mostly being paired in a way where it's like, it may be like with a bad coaching staff that is not able to enable them, or like just people that don't really care about their development at all, you know, just try to save money. So the thing is like, you basically have to wager, hey, can you actually develop these rookies underneath the system, or are you just doing this for fun? And if you're just doing it for fun, hey, might as well give older players that can maybe bring a bit more value to the team, intrinsic value to the team, like bring them in or to give them a paycheck and have them basically support you guys, the team to a mediocre standard, you know. So that's something that I've always been for, and I'm still for it. I don't dismiss that point, but I do think that there's value in bringing certain people that have a certain amount of like talent and bringing them in underneath a coach staff, underneath a structure that actually makes a lot of sense. So in our case, it's like, hey, we have Robert, who has been a long time esports sports psychologist. We have Hando, who is now an up-and-coming coach, and I have me with like now 7-8 years of experience. So I am kind of able to navigate a lot of these issues by simply like bringing in my expertise as a player and talking to the players about their struggles and being able to get them through those. And that's what a lot of other teams don't do, where they don't have that specific person or those specific people that are able to navigate those issues, the rookie issues, you know? So I think in this case scenario, it made a lot of sense. In other scenarios, it may not make a lot of sense.
Okay, fair enough. Like, what about, since I noticed on Monty's question, like you pointed out, you obviously weren't here last year when most of those changes took place. When you joined, had this roster already been set? Were all the players in the team?
Yep, all of them.
Because here's the thing, like, it's one thing if someone, like when Pr0lly was in 100 Thieves, if a player change happens, but he wanted that player specifically and he brings them on, it is going to change the way you'll think about the player or your expectations for them because maybe you saw something extra in them, right? I'll be fully honest with you, mate. When I saw this lineup, I thought this would be the worst team in LEC or like second worst or something like there's a couple of positives. Like I've always been a Febiven fan. I think it's pretty good. Dan actually showed some things last season.
I think
but
if
a lot
anything,
of them, it's like the Bavoid pickup killed a lot of the hype for people, you know. I think a lot of people didn't think this would be a good team, mate. So what was your expectations when you saw them?
Can't quite say that. I was kind of curious. Let's put it this way. I was nervous and curious at the same time because when I saw the roster, I honestly I didn't watch enough EU Masters last year, so I had no idea about especially Denik and Razork. I had no idea about the talent level. Then I heard all the memes about B-Boy, especially on social media, on Reddit. And I had to basically inform myself afterwards. And it's really an interesting process to me where like I didn't have any, as you said, you know, when you bring in a player that you know of, that you want to bring in, you can have this like preoccupation almost about the player that you bring him in for specific reasons, but I had no idea about the team. So I didn't have any preoccupations. I didn't have any kind of negative nor positive like feedback before I even met them. So I basically came from a neutral standpoint and just saw them as the people that they are. So for me, I actually like from names that I saw, I didn't know much, so I couldn't quite tell. And after working with them and starting to work with them, like I didn't have anything that I thought was like a negative or positive feedback to begin with. So I didn't have any kind of like bias towards them, so it made working with them actually a lot easier.
Actually, maybe Pr0lly can comment on the more abstract topic of like the angle of like, do you use the like it's like, I mean, obviously you literally did use Maurice for exactly that. You brought him in as a veteran jungler at the end to kind of fix some of the problems, but you've yourself tried a number of people who are rookies. Like, I mean, listen, I know I always say the word rookie's been ruined by LCS because they make it like if you played one spit, you're not a rookie anymore. To me, when you had Cody Son, he was a rookie as far as I'm concerned. Like, he was still very young in his career in the traditional sense. Like, he's a very inexperienced player. So you've been on both ends of it. What's your thought on like how to bring these players in?
I don't know. I mean, I would say I would be really hesitant joining a roster without having like previous, I guess, I don't know, not narratives, but like agenda, I guess, with the player. Not seeing like what they did before to see like what they could be doing. So yeah, I'm kind of curious how you jumped into that role, Maurice, because that's like that seems really hard. I wouldn't be able to do that very well. Because yeah, this first day of scrims, for example, I'd kind of sit there being like, so what do you want to do? Because I'd have to start learning from there, as opposed to being like, yeah, like when I brought you in, for example, I'm like, I kind of know what champion pool you're going to be good at and how you will fit into the team and like what role I would want you to have. But jumping in with like a whole bunch of rookies that I didn't like research a shit ton and didn't have like my own personal kind of like energy to push them, it would probably take me a long time for me to get like good working relationship with them and like good direction for them.
No, it's fair. I mean, that's actually something I've been I struggled with in the beginning, where I wasn't quite sure how to basically manage the people, because they obviously come from different backgrounds, and especially when you have people coming up from the challenger scene or the regional league scene, you kind of expect almost more than you should from a rookie, because they should have been coached for 1 or 2 years, but the coaching standards in the regional scenes, despite how vast it is at this point, is still pretty low. So the standards are like, yeah, coaching drafts, they give you a bit of gameplay, but it's more about the lifestyle changes that come with being a pro player. They're not really implemented. So nutrition, like behavior patterns within scrims, and just overall like attitude towards working like honestly a stressful LEC job is something they didn't really have implemented. So that was something, especially Hando and me, kind of had to push in from the very get-go, where we had to get them up to a certain LEC standards or something that we saw as the LEC standard. And it was actually, yeah, it took a lot of energy, and it still takes a lot of energy to actually get used to that myself, because I'm still a rookie at what I'm doing. Like, I mean, I had a coaching gig with Schalke, but there was an online coaching gig with Academy. So it's basically the low standard that I was talking about earlier that had nothing to do with the actual LEC standard. And that's something that I have to get used to still. And it's going to take a lot of work continuously, but I just had to make up an agenda for myself, or something with Hando, where we together just make up a narrative. That's what we want to push towards the players, and that's the course we're going to run. I think so far it has worked.
Do you think it's surprising that Schalke and the German football clubs, because correct me if I'm wrong, but don't the German football clubs have extensive youth programs that they are trying to develop players in?
Pretty much every football club nowadays does. Like that's like they try and sign players like when you're 12 years old and stuff. Yeah, of course, to get ahead of all the contracts and stuff.
So don't you think it's odd that if you were working with Schalke that they wouldn't put you in an environment where you could train up and coming players? Because you would think out of all teams, it would be the traditional sports teams who, especially in Europe, have a history of coaching these players from a very young age. Don't you think that would be the team that's putting the emphasis on that? I find that weird.
Yeah, you think so, but I think especially last year it was kind of a turning point for a lot of teams because of the LEC introduction. So due to the franchising, a lot of teams had to basically revamp the academy leagues and the regional leagues because they didn't have academy teams before that. So they basically had to like hire players, then make short-term adjustments, and then make sure that they land in the right league. For example, Fanatics like made a wrong decision from what I know, that they didn't want to really go to the British league, and like something like that they didn't have the practice environment. So a lot of things came together at the same time. But I do think for the football teams that you'd expect it, but it also depends on the structure that they're following, because in some case scenarios, they're completely trying to be independent from the actual football team or from the actual club. And this financial independence that they're trying to seek or search is something that they have to build up from within. So that means that they're going to be like operating independently, even structure-wise, from the actual football club. So I wouldn't take the name as an indicator for the actual structure that they follow.
Okay. It just seems to me that would be one of the valuable things and experience that they could bring to the esports scene. So it's just weird that they wouldn't actually have that same model, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It was pretty weird to me too. But then again, I also understood that at that point when I was joining Schalke as the academy coach, that it was going to be a long-term process, if anything. And then I saw they won a Thieves Cake, and that wasn't a long-term process anymore. So.
Was by the way, when I remember when this lineup was initially announced, another reason why people weren't that high on it is because it actually looked as though Febiven was just listed on the roster and people didn't know if he would play. And you had that player Ronaldo listed as the mid laner, who, if people don't know, was like the support player of Fnatic's Challenger team last year. So that in itself seemed like it looked like they just at the last second got a whole bunch of players and no one even knew whether Febiven would play. Was it actually intended that would be like a competition for the spots and he won the spot or something? Was he always going to be the mid laner? What was the situation with that?
It was always intended to be competition for the spot. So Ronaldo has played a ton of different roles within Fnatic Academy underneath Handro, because Handro coached him at that point too. So it was basically he and Febiven together was supposed to compete for the mid lane spot, and it's still that way. Just Febiven overall recently, especially due to his expertise in veteran leadership, has just succeeded Ronaldo like in terms of helping the team out. So that's something that we've been evaluating every single day, honestly. But yeah, to begin with, they were supposed to compete. Now Febiven, at least for now, has proven his worth and will keep reevaluating the position, you know.
Because the thing is, again, people might not remember their history here, but someone else in this call actually has experience coaching Febiven. Now, listen, it wasn't the best year of either of their careers, but it did happen. Probably it was in season 7. That's right.
Of my career as a coach too, though. So they had a good start and then a bad end.
Spring was good for a while.
Yeah.
What was it actually like to work with Febiven, though?
Joining H2K when they were in Challenger.
Oh, you had at the beginning as well. Yes, I forgot about that. Yeah, true.
And that was when they're, famous chokers. So that was an interesting gig to start out with.
Yeah, because you know him even better than I remember, yeah. What do you think of him as a player?
Oh, I mean, he went through crazy transformation. Because, initially when I started coaching him, he was, like, extreme ego kid, where we'd go through draft or something like that. And he's like, don't ban any mids. I'll beat him with whatever. And it's like we were playing. I can't remember who we were playing against now, but it was like a Xerath one-trick player. Xerath Syndra was like the only 2 champions that guy can play. And I was like, all right, well, we're drafting against this guy. Let's ban his 2 champions. Then mid's gonna be pretty easy. He's like, nah, just give him Xerath and I'll play against it. Dude, this guy can only play 2 champions. We're banning it. So going from that version of Febiven to last time I coached him, where it was a lot more like strategic, where he's like, all right, yeah, I can beat him with these champions, and this guy has a good roster with these. It's a lot better that way, but yeah, we didn't have much success, but I wouldn't say it was mostly his fault or anything like that.
I've noticed, at least at the start of the season, when I started watching Misfits, I was kind of disappointed by Febiven's play. It seemed like he was getting bullied around a lot, especially on the LeBlanc. But with every passing week, he seems to be getting better and better and more confident. Would you say that was a synergy issue with the team, Maurice, or did you perceive his play was a little bit lower at the start of the split?
I think it's a bit of both. So I think he's someone that now in his career, honestly, has been more of a how about this? Like he's definitely help first and then do it for myself later kind of guy. So he's always going to try to build up his teammates first. And I felt like he had so much discomfort within the team to begin with because we were not quite at the level that he wanted to be at. That he almost had to sacrifice his own play in order to make the team better because his veteran leadership has always been obviously been like really valuable to the team, and every single day he has been pushing the team and trying to get them to a certain level. And I think once that was achieved, when the minimum was achieved, he could actually do something for himself and focus more on his own play.
Got it. Because he's been performing really well in like the last week, but before that it was just sort of underwhelming. But that makes a lot more sense considering he's the one slotting in with these players.
Oh, but basically he's been nothing but great. I thought of him as an ego kid too when because I remember from the Fnatic days at least when he was in Fnatic 2015. I met him at Worlds and everything like that. Every single time I had any kind of conversation with him or heard anything about him, it was just like pure ego. And it's been so interesting to see someone change by.
What do you mean by that though? Like, what do you mean he's like pure? What do you mean like you met him? He's like, hey, I'm Febiven. I saw a kill faker, by the way.
He was like that. To be fair, when I met him for the first time too, I also got exactly that same vibe. It was funny.
It's like I can't even explain it. It's just like, I mean, he would not hesitate to just call out members from my team, for example, when they underperformed. You know, it's like it's not even his place to be at. You know, and he just does it. And so I think he was really opinionated, and he really had a lot of room to grow. And I think now he has fulfilled that room. To be fair, I'm not just pleasantly surprised. I'm actually like, honestly, just in awe on how much he works for the team and how much he works for himself. Because this guy is the first one in the office and probably the last one to leave. So he's having that mama mentality for sure.
I will say, like, I know we're talking about like, the ego kid in like a really negative way, but I do think that kind of start as a person, if you're able to kind of grow out of it, is a really healthy place to start. I know some people will fall into the trap and they'll stay that way. And so that's kind of like the bad negative aspect of it. But if you were starting your career with this kind of like big opinion, big voice, and you can kind of learn your way into a more like positive way, a positive kind of like mentality about it, I think it's like really healthy and really strong, especially in League now where it's a bit more individualistic than it used to be. Having kind of like your ego and your balls that you like have with you when you started and being able to pull them out now, I think is really important.
No, I'd describe it like this. I mean, listen, pause on that last part. He didn't mean that to go with pulling the balls out. Yeah. He didn't mean, you know, if you've got your ego on your balls, you can pull those out anytime you're like, what the wait a minute. I don't know how your coach, your team's volley, but
not literal.
Yes, of course.
Emotional, your spirit.
There you go. No, but the thing is,
spirit testicles, nice.
I actually get the premise of what he's saying there, though, because basically it goes like this. It's one of the reasons why I always preach that you shouldn't give up on there's a million of them, but like the really talented but like toxic young players that you get, because what you tend to find is if they become the best player, it's not like they completely abandon that aspect of the personality. They just kind of like channel it. Like they make it, instead of like they direct that energy and exuberance and ego to like wrecking their teammates, now they channel it towards just being hyper competitive or something, or like making their teammates buy into their philosophy. And so it's a lot easier, even though it's still hard, to channel that than it is to get someone who's just a super passive, laid-back person who has a little bit of skill. It's really hard to convince those players. Like I always say, the thing I hate is when you think a player's really good and then you talk to them and they don't even think they're as good as you think they are. It's like, well, how am I supposed to get through to this guy? It's like it's way harder to convince someone they're good, I think, rather than just channel them a little bit if they're a little bit off center.
I mean, it depends on the person too. Like some people are just too emotionally stunted almost to actually be able to channel that at any point, and they will forever be the people that are just hyper competitive but also hyper toxic. And I think there's a term that I think, at least how I describe Febiven, for example, as a positive toxicity almost, where he pushes the team forward and he has like a certain standard for himself that he will always uphold and force everyone around him to uphold too. So that's something I'm all for. But if someone just is toxic because he thinks he's good. I'm not about that. Let's put it this way.
It's all right.
See, that's what we do in Europe. We've just like, we know we're not going to get people out toxic, so we're just dividing them into positive toxicity, like potential toxicity, like bad toxicity.
To be fair, constructive toxicity has been a running theme of this show for years. So
exactly,
I agree. I mean, it's you can never get rid of it because that's like the core of what competitive people are. Yes. They're not going to stop criticizing people. They're not going to stop criticizing themselves, and the expectation is so high because they want to win. So that's why it's so funny to call a lot of this behavior toxic, because the very thing that makes them toxic is also the same thing that makes them good at the game. So it's just about channeling that energy into constructive toxicity instead of actually just allowing it to be corrosive within the team. So I think it's funny because so many people see this kind of behavior and they can't identify with it because they don't have a personality that has this same drive to win, which is exactly why they're not a professional player in the first place, right? You were not designed to be a professional player if you don't have that level of drive and motivation. So seeing the plebs comment on that is always really funny to me, because they're just talking about something that they have no concept of and is the very thing why they like that person in the first place, but they can't connect the in-game level of play to this necessary personal quality, right? And so it just ends up in this cognitive dissonance that people have when they watch them, because they want the person to be both good and likable, and these things often don't go together.
It's like I often say, like, coming from my background in Counter-Strike, where before, like, we didn't obviously have like a concept like solo queue where you could become famous before you were a pro and then get picked up to a pro team. The idea is you just went through the semi-pro scene. You joined one team, you played some in one competition. Hopefully you proved yourself. You got recruited to a better team, and eventually you get end up as a pro if you can. So I always used to say, if you think that the top pros are like toxic, you don't understand how they could get there. Because if you were a guy, right, who's totally cool with just carrying, but your teammates letting you down, it doesn't matter that they're not as good as you, then you would never leave those teams. You would still be on like the equivalent of your ranked fives team now, 5 years later. Like, the idea, the person who became a pro is the person who at one point, at many points in time, probably actually looked around and said, I'm actually a lot better than these guys. I think I even should be even better. And I'm going to go for the next level. I'm going to leave them behind, as cutthroat as it is, and go to the top. So yeah, at the top, you always then coach the opposites, because that's the group of people you have. That's why a lot of the coaching is like, no, play with the team and, you know, respect your team and stuff. Because the people that you get through almost the natural selection process there are going to be like that. Because why else would you become a pro if you don't think you're going to be one of the best?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But anyway, I always enjoy having these kind of personalities, especially when I don't have to coach them, going back to Febiven, because it's incredibly fun for me to talk to these people about their opinions, because they tend to be very opinionated, they tend to be very confident. So for me, as somebody who doesn't have to be on a team with them, it's awesome. Like, I'm loving every second of it, right? Being their coach is the hard process of trying to change that into something that can be more productive. So I can understand why you guys would have had that frustration. But for me, talking to Febiven was awesome at the time. It was really fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I kind of feel like when I watch Dardoch. Because, like, I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I never had to coach him previously watching all this stuff. But I'm also on the other side where I'm like, I love talking to him. I love watching him. And I really hope he does well and, like, works out.
Yeah.
Like, so all this stuff, like, I'm on, like, the good side of everything with Dardoch. So I'm just like, dude, I hope this fucking works out and he gets to, like, crush stuff. I didn't have to participate in, like, you know, the toxic shit that went on, whatever, back then. So I'm just like, I'm waiting for the good, you know?
So, as a former TSM jungler, amazing.
Yeah.
Have you been watching any of the TSM games so far this season? Because they've been slowly getting better.
Yeah.
I've watched like one or two, to be fair. I didn't watch that much. Kind of been interested in the development though, because like for me, it's kind of fascinating that they actually made the step to find a brilliant Dardoch. It's something they actually talked about not being a culture fit like for such a long time. But then essentially, Dardoch is like, at least from when I judge his personality, is really similar to my personality was back in season 4. So they kind of wanted him, but they didn't want him. And then they had like a lot of like junglers in between who over the course of time basically became more or less followers more so than leaders, especially I guess like Centurion and then later on the Senskin iteration. That's just like so confusing that they didn't see this as like the necessary step to begin with. That should have been a step that should have been done like 2 years ago, as soon as Svenskön was gone, or they should have brought in someone else with a similar mindset, because that's what they need. It's like the counterpoint, the antagonist almost to Bjergsen and the overall honestly, to Bjergsen is really driven. Bjergsen is really high powered. Like he has a really high drive, but he's someone that may need someone that can take some weight off of him. Someone that can lead the team, someone that can take some emotional leadership off of him. And it's taken them so long to realize that, but I'm glad they finally did, to be fair.
I think you could even say that even ties into the earlier point about, like, if you take a certain type of person, like, again, a fan might think naively, every team should just be 5 people who are all really cool, easygoing people. And then they're all sort of turning to each other like, what do you think we should do, actually? What should we do? Like, no, what you actually want, basically, what Maurice is describing here is creative tension. Like, if you have a very driven person who has a set vision of how the mid lane should be played, if you just let him have a load of junglers that will just roll over and do anything he says, there's a chance that they might only do what the mid laner wants and then not make the rest of the team work. Like, one of the main things of being a jungler, from talking to all the pro junglers I've known, is, like, you'd imagine knowing which of the 2 lanes to say no to as you go to the other one. Like, you have to have the backbone to do that. So what you actually wanted, as we're saying here, is the reason why it was a perfect narrative fit to put Dardoch in TSM is because you got the one jungler that nobody could sort of corral and get to do exactly what they wanted to do. And the team that was too busy crushing every other jungler and making them do everything they wanted. Like, why not just put those 2 together? Let's see what happens. Maybe they fix each other. Maybe they overlap.
Well, it would also be, I think, somewhat disingenuous to imply that, based on what you're saying, Maurice, about how there were fit issues with TSM, they kind of ran out of options except for Dardoch in the off season.
Oh, no, it was like that Loki meme. He was just sat there in a prison cell, like, you must be really desperate if you come to, like the meme that everyone always posts. That was basically what was going on, of course.
So it wasn't, it wasn't TSM's first choice. Let's put it that way. Now we can have a discussion about they had to take a level of risk on Dardoch because he was the best available choice purely from a skill perspective to them. But I think they could have had a different jungler or junglers that they were pursuing, but lost out when it came to other teams signing them first. Now, that said, they did beat Dignitas this week, which Dignitas is looking a little bit weaker. Dignitas also had a very interesting I think Dignitas got very outdrafted in that game. Probably. It was the Vel'Koz Froggen game with Hootie on the Kennen, where Dardoch was just tackling the Kennen every time he tried to flank. And the problem with that, I was watching that game, and the problem with what was going on in that game in particular was, when you look at what they were trying to do, so Dignitas basically didn't have a front line. They had an Elise in the jungle, and then they had the Braum with the Aphelios, Vel'Koz, and Kennen. So basically, you're relying on the Kennen to get a stun on the opponent. Like, you have to have a big flank to engage, because otherwise they just run all over your backline. Meanwhile, it was very easy for Dardoch's set just to remove Kennen from the fight. There was a fight at the end where Kennen really only ulted one person because he was so easy to stop on the flank. And then there was just nothing else Dignitas could do because there was too much engage on the side of TSM. When the Aurelia, the Leon are all getting into the backline, it was pretty ridiculous. So that was an impressive win, and I thought TSM played it well, but I also thought they had a pretty significant advantage out of the draft in terms of that composition.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big issue was the set flex that they did. I think that was a problem for Dignitas. I don't think they saw it. Even though I know Dardoch plays a lot of just shit in the jungle. I think that's where they got really cornered. And I'm just guessing because Kennen's not really in the meta. This was supposed to be their big counterpick to set and going to be a split pusher. Because I really don't like this draft for sure. So I'm trying to figure out what they were thinking that they thought it was good, unless they just straight up fucked up. And I'm like, all right, dude, if I'm drafting this way and I did this and I need to rationalize it, I'm like, cool, I'm picking this Kennen to like just shit on the set, and we're gonna split push because team fights are gonna be pretty hard against like Leona MF, stuff like that. So that's my guess of what they went for. But then when it all happened and ended, and they saw the set flex into the jungle and then the Aurelia top, and they're like, well, can't really play AD against Aurelia anymore. So we're going to go AP Kennen, and now we have a really shitty team comp.
So there was another set flex this week that I wanted to talk about, and Amazing, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because we're obviously seeing Set banned a whole lot because of his flexibility and the fact that he is overtuned coming out, as is typical with new champ releases from Riot. But what really impressed me was G2's Set flex into the mid lane when they played up against Rogue, which I thought was really, like, I thought that draft was just incredibly smart, because if you looked at what Rogue was running, so Senna's a very bad tank buster, right? Because she doesn't actually scale with attack speed. So when you're playing, let's say, the LeBlanc Senna, you're basically trying to poke them or burst them. But if you're playing into Soraka, Set, Gragas, Nautilus, like, you're never going to get damage onto them into the late game because it'll just be instantly healed up, right? And the engage is so good onto your backline from the Set that you're just going to be crippled oftentimes. So I thought this game, G2, for me, when I looked at this draft, it was just a waiting game for G2, because people will say, oh, this game was close, right? But for me, there was a point in this game where it was just going to be impossible for LeBlanc Senna to do absolutely anything around G2, and it was going to be all about G2 forcing fights, controlling objectives, and I was very impressed by them last picking Set and putting it in the mid lane in this situation, understanding that they would really outscale in the late game.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of surprising that actually Set went through to last pick. That was the most surprising thing about that draft, where, I mean, obviously if blue side can only put a top lane, then it's really hard to actually pick it early to a certain extent, unless you really think that's the overtune. That's the only reasoning for it. But it getting to last pick without any kind of bans is really curious. Especially, maybe they didn't expect it anymore after they saw the Soraka. Maybe that was the thinking of Rogue. They just, okay, I see the Soraka. I don't think they're going to pick it anymore, because we know that Wunder is going to play Soraka top lane, and we don't expect Perkz to flex it, so that could be something. But other than that, I think the way the game was played out too was just they had a small advantage around the Nashor when they actually got the Nashor, and they immediately threw it away at the Dragon. So it was more about they had too little engaged to the backline to actually kill the Soraka. Every teamfight she survived with a sliver of health, and at some point it was an outscaling teamfight. So I was just kind of weirded out by the fact that they actually got to have it at that point in the draft, to be fair.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I'm just so impressed with G2, because almost never you would see this situation and be like, oh, this is great. And when I started looking at it, and I was surprised, and I was like, actually, this makes so much sense to me why they did this, but it's such a particular situation. But it's also a situation that we're seeing increasingly as the meta game is developed, because not only do we have all these changes in the offseason that we always do, there's actually more new champs this offseason than normal, because they released Aphelios, Set, and Senna all in very quick succession to each other at the end of the year. So we're dealing with three very powerful new champions in addition to all the changes to the dragons and the map and the normal itemization changes, right? So it's even more of a shakeup in ways. And I think as we've seen over time, I'm actually, the more I watch, the less I like Senna. And Senna is going to be nerfed anyway, so it doesn't matter as much. But I feel like she's really, like, if you're not using her in poke compositions, and even poke compositions these days have been shown to be very weak in the late game. So I think her niche was sort of closing anyway. So in some ways, I'm kind of disappointed that they're nerfing her, because I think she's kind of on the way out of the meta regardless.
No, I agree with that one. I can only say so much, because obviously I don't want to give everything away. But I do think that Senna in itself is a pick that it requires a lot more skill to use. Let's put it this way. I think the execution part on her is, like, first of all, you have to close relatively early. You have to make sure to utilize her early healing potential. Like, for example, fight in the side lane, then ult that side lane, make use of that in some kind of way. And you have to make sure that you're able to pick at least one peel champion around her. So something like the Tahm Kench, something like the Thresh. So she needs an escape to a certain extent. So that in itself also limits you in draft. So there are a lot of things that you have to consider when picking Senna, whereas I think Aphelios, for example, is an AD carry, where while he does not have an escape, he just has so much damage that it doesn't actually matter whether or not he has an escape. He just puts his turrets down in the teamfight at some point and one-shots everything, which makes absolutely no sense and is still really mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
Like every scrim that we play with or against it, I see it, and it does way more damage than you cannot calculate the damage anymore. And that's something.
It must be hard to coach against that champion, right? To try and even explain to them what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. You tell them, oh, he has no escape. Engage on him. And then he has the shuriken weapon, and he puts a turret down, and the gauge is being one shot. Like he can't quite coach that, so it's a bit of an issue. But yeah, that champion is just wild to me.
The thing is, I know the obvious answer. You just need 200 years of experience playing against it.
It's true.
The memes write themselves. Yep. You need to get in a hyperbolic time chamber and do 200 years in the next week, and then you'll be fine.
No, but to kind of go back about the Senna point, I actually kind of like it a bit more now that we're seeing it more, and now that it's being like nerfed and kind of falling out. I like the position that it has if people are learning it properly, because like I think one thing that, or some of the things that people aren't doing with Senna very often is like abusing ult and top carry matchups. I know it's very often like tank matchups top, but that's something like, I mean, you can like theory craft it a bit, but you don't see it in actuality like in any of these games, right? Where you're playing like a Camille into Aatrox, and then Camille ults and fights, and you Senna ult, and then now the lane is just kind of like fucked because Aatrox can never fight back against Camille anymore.
Right, but that's my point. Is like I feel like we're finding before the Senna nerfs hit in the next patch. I feel like we're finding Senna is not a power pick; she's a niche pick. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm saying is I'm sad she's getting nerfed because I feel like we're going to see a natural movement away from her because she is more specialized than I think people are using her for right now. And as to the Aphelios point, to go back before I talk about some other AD carries, I was talking with one of the Riot designers in the past couple of weeks, and he made a very good point when we were talking about Aphelios last episode. And he said, which I hadn't thought of but seems very obvious in retrospect, one of the problems with Aphelios is that he has alien weapons, so you can't immediately tell what they do. If he had been designed in a way where he had real-world weapons...
Get me out.
No, you know what?
I don't know, right? Listen, I know what he means, but the problem is, like, none of these are real characters. Like, this fucking, one of those things called fucking yordles or whatever. The premise doesn't even make sense.
No. The premise is good.
Come on.
The premise is good. The premise is good. So if he had, all this chakram weapons, you don't inherently know what the weapon does, right? So if he had an actual sniper rifle or something like that, and they were real-world analogs, the clarity would be significantly higher with it.
Was this a fucking alien Riot designer? Was this one of the good Riot designers, or one of the ones who came from a maximum security prison like Arkham Asylum? He was like, I must destroy the world through making champions.
Objectively, that's more clear.
Who is this guy?
I think it's still bad.
See what he means.
I still think it's
still
bad.
Not a very good theory craft, is it?
Well, what they're doing now with Aphelios, right? They're gonna let you see his like holstered weapon, and I think that's the clarity issue that was really bad, especially for like competitive play, where it's like, yeah, you can see one of his guns, but you're like, what? I mean, he gets on hit with his like holstered weapon, but you don't know what that on hit is until he presses W again. I think that was a clarity thing. I think they're fixing. I'm really happy about. But that when Aphelios was released and you're looking at it, you're like,
no.
I mean, I see half of what he's gonna do. It still
is going to be horrible. So I want to talk about how LCK is using a bunch of Kalista and Ashe instead of Senna, because there's been a really, I would say, different meta that's been developing in LCK. I haven't seen that many games of LCK yet, but I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on why we would see so much Kalista and Ashe in that region when we haven't seen it in Europe or NA.
Bot Prio. Sure. Korea loves Prio like crazy. Wave clear is way too important over there. Even when, what was the champion? I can't remember.
What year are we talking about? Give us a clue. Is this recently, last year?
This might have been, no, I think it was 2018.
Okay. We're talking about an AD carry now, right?
Yeah, it was when like Ashe and Varus were being played. It was like utility AD carries, and then it started shifting away from it, but Korea did not. And it was usually because like Ashe and Varus would beat every other AD carry in lane. But in NA, it's like cool if you had lane prio, like, and maybe you get like Drakes or something like that, but now you're going to get outscaled by like the Ezreal or the Xayah or something like that. But in Korea, it was like it's just only Ashe Varus, because if you lost prio in Korea, you would like get dive bot, or you lose Drakes like 24/7. Like there would be no like fighting back. But in NA, where the game was like 30 minutes, or 20 minutes, you have like this Trist instead of like an Ashe or something like that. Like you can actually fight back. Okay. So I think and also like I think LCK was the first region to start like teching Hurricane like 24/7. Everyone was doing like Shiv and Rapid Fire to poke, and then LCK is like, I'm gonna push this lane faster than you. So I think they're really obsessed with that. So not seeing Senna, I kind of understand it, because Senna's like, it takes a long time to kill those minions, man.
then it should rather be wave control than lane prior, because I think Senna in most matchups, actually, if she gets to push, I mean, if she gets a slow push, she can actually get lane prior for a long time and can abuse on a tower. But it's like, I think maybe the champion is just maybe it's just because of bot fighting. Maybe that's it. Maybe you just want to have more fighting around bot lane and be able to dive more. But honestly, I think SEK, at least recently, last 2 years, has been really, really bad at adapting new champions. I think that may be more the case. I think they're every single year I see so many picks that, like, you're asking yourself, is 2015 back or something like that, where they just bring old champions that they should have never been in the first place and think that that's good, and then other people are adapting it too and realize that's actually bad. And it's something where SEK just doesn't. They're oftentimes behind the meta, or they have a really unique way of approaching the meta, which is usually a more passive and, I guess, safe approach towards the late game. I think that's maybe it.
One thing, wait a minute, I'll let this go in a second, but I still just can't get away from that fucking bullshit angle that they sold you on, Monty. That whole thing about, you see, he's an alien, so his weapons would not be intuitive to. Because the thing I don't get about that is like Tom Kench is a fucking catfish that teleports on the map.
I don't think you understand what he was saying. I don't think you understand what he was saying. He was saying that there is a clarity issue because he has alien weapons, and if they had designed him with more real-world analog weapons, it would be easier to tell what his guns did. That's the point.
No, I understand. I actually understand.
As in the guns don't exist in real life.
Yes,
so you have to, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So if he had a real shotgun instead, or like a flamethrower, it would have been a billion times easier to understand what he did. But because
that sounds
every gun is like
a gun that you see all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you're like, what? It's, the point is like, if you're going to make a wacky champion, you can't also make his visuals alien, because then you have no starting point to understand what he is, which I think is a very valid point.
Whoever was working in that think tank for the last 6 weeks, desperately coming up with a reason that it's not a total travesty the way they designed that champion. Well done. You got Monty at least. That's all that matters. You got Monty with your argument.
Damn you. Stop putting words in my mouth. I still hate it. My point was, it would be slightly better, not fixed. He still needs to be fixed. I still hate him. He is the only champion I have ever said, please delete this from the game, ever, okay? But please delete him from the game. Seriously. It's awful.
Start a petition right there. Honestly, get Akali in there too. Might as well get Akali in there too.
That reminds me, actually, by the way, when we had one of our famous incidents years ago in the first year of ever doing Summoning Insight, where people, no joke, actually did make like a change.org petition that just said like, remove Duncan Thorin shields from Summoning Insight. Something crazy like that. But as you'd imagine, it only got like 700 votes. But you know, like those are the ones where like if they get 10,000, then like Obama or whatever had to like fucking like send a letter out like, yeah, we will be looking into this. Like, as though it was ever going to get 10,000 people for that. And as though, by the way, like the US government would have any jurisdiction over just like a company having a guy doing a podcast. Like the entire thing was ridiculous, but whatever.
It was funny.
Fair play. You can still find it if you Google my name. It's like on like the second page or something. So brief dip into politics there.
I think we should talk a little bit about Cloud9's performance in NA, because
guess we have to.
This is it. What do you mean? They're the best team in LCS.
It's a joke.
More reasons than one.
So I was like, I guess I have to talk about the best team in one of the major regions. Yeah, big bummer, I guess.
We call it the major region now.
Okay. All right. Calm down there. You played in LCS for a while.
I got 8th place last year. I can't believe. This is so frustrating to me to see Source right now and Xmithy. They're like, this is actually like a really good roster, right? In Immortals roster, and they're still winning every single game. Like
amazing.
They're 4-2 now.
Amazing.
What did I do last year?
You can't make fun of NA and simultaneously have said that you would have made the World Finals in 2014 with TSM. I refuse to allow you to do both of these things.
We're not doing that thing. We're gonna get everyone back from back then, and they will tell you the same thing. Even other coaches, they will tell you the same thing.
Here's the thing. I know what that is actually, Monty. That was just one of the first original attempts to liquidate your Scrimbuck stock into actually real world wins. That was the first ever. Yeah, he had his net value was incredibly high from Scrimbucks, but he tried to then liquidate in real world cash and then buy like a Lamborghini. It's all right. A lot of people have tried it. A lot of people have won those scrims. It's okay. We know. Obviously, that was in the days before the coaches just secretly leak scrims where TSM beats a Korean team. Like, oh, what's happened?
Oh my god, I hate when that happens.
You know the way? Have you ever noticed that, by the way, guys? That the scrims that always get leaked from Korea is always like a Western team just like stomping the mega Korean team. Like, oh, how did this get out? Oh, we're really disappointed with whoever's leaked this. Like, are you for real? And then in the actual tournament, they never do any of that stuff, of course.
Yeah, let's not.
All I'll say is
that one again.
No, all I'll say is this: whoever did leak any of those scrims, well done, well done.
Selective hacking. Yeah.
Well done, exactly. Well done. Anyway, move on.
So good. All right. So I do want to talk about Cloud9 a little bit, though, because they have been incredibly dominant. And every time that we're only 3 weeks in, but people have said, oh, well, maybe Dignitas can take them down. Maybe FlyQuest can take them down.
There's no one left to take them down except Team Liquid, maybe with Rox. Let's be real. Like, they beat everyone else, basically.
It's been convincing, the wins that they've had, to say the least. And we've got some stats.
We can tie this actually in. Oh, sorry.
We got some stats by Microsoft to look at. So if you guys want to check it out on the actual stream, just some basic stats while we have these conversations, because this matchup between Blabber and Santorin was really interesting, because I think Santorin is actually having a very strong season right now.
He's actually generally been a pretty decent player the last couple of years. Like, he's kind of found his own. So I wanted to say something about this actually, because this ties in perfectly to the discussion we were having earlier about Febiven type players. Because the thing with someone like Blabber is, obviously, like, it's even if you watched him when he first came into Cloud9, obviously the whole thing about him is he's one of those junglers who's like, you just go forwards the whole time, basically. Let's say you want to just go super aggressive, going off. Like, that is actually, I know from people playing solo queue, they're going to think that's the worst. Like, oh, he's going to int all the time. It's like, actually, that's like a pretty good like trend to have in a jungle. Because again, now it's about like channeling it to the right times to go in, etc. The last thing you want is the opposite, where it's the guy who never wants to go in and you're trying to convince him to do that. So I think what you've seen from this split, for my money, from Blabber, is he only does the really overextend one every now and then. It's like he almost does like he's allowed to do one for every three good ganks he does. That's just like the ratio. But the difference is the ratio is reasonable now. He's not throwing any of these games. So as a result, like, you get all the benefits of him being really aggressive.
I think Blabber definitely went from a player that was hard to predict to now it's like it's hard to predict, but in a different way. It's more like it's smart plays. So yeah, I was a non-believer for sure with Blabber. Even at Worlds, but now this split, it makes like I can see him being really impressive.
Well, we talked about how it's important to learn your limits by being aggressive, and what was really impressive to me was not in the FlyQuest game where he was obviously super dominant. Looking at these stats, it was a very one-sided game, but in the Dignitas game when he flew in and he killed the enemy jungler, and then he stole the Herald. I was like, it was a very impressive steal, because he knew that he was going to be able to get in there when the Herald was dying, kill the jungler, and then smite the Herald and take it. He died as part of that play, but it was just like...
Actually, I think to make it a little bit more fun of a play, I might be wrong, so I might have to rewatch it, but I'm pretty sure he didn't smite.
Oh, really?
He did the Q, flash R, and then killed Rek'Sai when the eye was open. And he turned around, punched the eye, and then ward jumped out. So he like bought time, killed someone, took Herald.
It was great play.
Probably just button bashed, if I'm being honest. Probably didn't do any of it on purpose. Yeah. It worked out, whatever. He's just said YOLO. I'm bringing that boomer turn back from about 10 years ago.
Oh, man. I didn't believe in him either. To be fair, when I faced him last year in scrims too, I thought he didn't know what he was doing. I still partially think that he still may not know everything about the game yet. But
well, I don't think anybody would claim that.
I think he's definitely he's a lot closer now, like, to being a great jungler, or like to being a consistently great jungler than he was last year. Because last year was like pure coin flip, and this year it's like channeling his coin flip into the team structure, and he's actually like utilizing his own mechanical ability. It's not even aggression. I would call it mechanical ability, because he's actually ahead of a lot of other junglers in terms of just his mechanical prowesses, and he knows his damage limits really, really well. And that's something that you don't see too much from upcoming talent in NA. I think you see more like the scare type that doesn't want to quite go in, that wants to lay back and wait for the late game. So I'm honestly surprised by him. I didn't take him for such a great jungler, but this year he's actually surprising me. So that says something, I hope.
In the game that we're looking at right now between Cloud9 and FlyQuest, Cloud9 managed to draft Rumble, Gragas, Kiana, Aphelios, and Nautilus. which people were joking about that they had assembled Exodia in terms of a composition, and then they got, a 17-2 against FlyQuest. And it was really, I think, basically only those 2 kills and just a couple of towers away from being a perfect game. So it was an incredibly dominant performance. How do these drafts happen? Because
this one is an anomaly.
This is wild.
When this happened, it was like, oh my gosh, FlyQuest, what? Yeah, Curry, I think, just clicked the wrong buttons when he was telling his team to ban stuff. For sure. Yeah,
I have to retake it. I have to take it again.
It's really disgusting. It's like your win condition against this comp is we're gonna win all 3 lanes and then perma push 3 lanes and never let them group, and then you can win. That's how you beat this comp. But if you're not shit stomping them in lane, if you're not like splitting them up permanently, if they can ever group once, if they can get to 1 item, you're gonna lose the game. So it's
I do enjoy Kiana ult stuns into Rumble equalizers. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. Oh man, a Rumble ult on a stun target. That's something we haven't been seeing. I don't know if you watched the TL game yesterday.
It's a Tam Ken Jar from first rotation, like by FlyQuest. I think. Oh my god.
Mistakes were made.
Thing is, though, I do actually have my own questions. Like, I actually think Viper is a player I'm kind of like on the fence about, because when he was in like rookie status, again, being in the league long, he looked actually like semi-impressive. Like when he got into team fights, he was usually pretty good. His laning was a bit whatever, but whatever. He's a beginning player. The problem is now, as like a pro player in a team that like actually was doing pretty well the first few weeks, I wonder if he's going to have like serious champion issues going forwards in the league. Because if you look what he's played so far, half of his games are Aatrox. He played 1 Mordekaiser game, and the other 2 games are Riven, which he's like famously was just like a signature.
And it just gets banned now, by
the way. And Camille, right? So where's everything else? Like at the moment, there's a lot you can play in the top lane. You can play, as you see, Rumble, obviously On. You can play fucking millions of things. Aurelia,
Rumble's perma-banned.
Gangplank. There's a million things you can play.
I'll say, yeah. I would have liked to see like an Ornn or a GP. I don't think he's been much of a GP player, so I know that's a champion you need like so many games on to actually be successful with to play the team fights properly. But yeah, I think he probably can play Ornn. I just haven't seen it, and I think GP is one of the ones where if you want to be a top laner, you have to learn this champion like in and out, because it's always somewhere in the meta like lurking when like tanks get picked or when it's like bot is the meta. Like GP becomes like super dominant because you just shoot your gun bot and your bot 2v2s. So yeah, that's a champion that I'm sure they're practicing, because I can't imagine not being able to draft GP for my team.
Yeah. Well, I think what's so great about GP is he has a decent laning phase. He has incredible objective control, because if you're ahead, he's like one of those champions that helps you get more ahead by barreling around dragons or other objectives or Baron. Has huge damage, can break CC, and he's got a global ultimate so he can help you with other ganks and get lanes more ahead. Without a massive nerf to numbers or a fundamental redesign, it's just one of those champs like Lee Sin that's always going to be viable, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a big issue with him is like, as soon as you play against a GP, like if you do nothing to top, like you're kind of playing like 4 versus 4.5 on the map. So it's like, it puts a lot of pressure on the enemy team to actually do something about it, because you don't want to, if he gets a Triforce, he's going to wave clear forever, not give a shit. And also with like Herald being so important, I know they're nerfing Herald a bit, but with like swaps being so prevalent at like 8 minutes and stuff like that, like a GP can just like fuck up swap tempo so hard. It's one of those like unknown powers where sometimes you'll see teams take these like late tempo swaps, and the reason is like if they don't take this swap and match it, like they're gonna just lose the game like right now. So GP puts a lot of pressure on the enemy team. So it's like if you can get away with it, especially if you're playing against a top laner who's not very strong, right? If a team doesn't know how to play around top well, do top dives well, which is a pretty like difficult like skill to have as a team. If they can't do that well, like GP is like almost always a solid pick.
No.
I have a question for you guys, because we didn't get to this earlier, but we've seen Misfits do this, and it's relevant to the C9 FlyQuest game. Let's talk about Diana, because we haven't really gone on a deep dive, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about when to pick Diana and why it's really a part of the meta right now.
I think it became part of the meta simply as a Rumble counter pick. I think that's basically it. I think the reason for her existence is basically that in laning phase, at least against mid Rumbles, she does really, really well. She can all in all the time, and then at some point, like create kill pressure on him. So Rumble is not able to fight the way that he wants to fight, which is just push up mid lane, roam into enemy jungle, or roam through the river to the bot lane and put his ult down, something like that. So she definitely denies his push ability, especially after level 6. I do think that though that pick in itself is something that I think a lot of teams almost over prioritize, and they don't quite know her limitations, because they're definitely jungle mid 2v2s where she can't play the game. She will just be permaganked. And I think we saw this. I think SK played a game where they played Diana and they faced the LeBlanc Lee Sin, if I remember correctly, or something similar. And Diana 0-2 out of the game, doesn't any.
I think he's crashed, unfortunately.
No.
In that sense there. Let's see.
I was good.
He was talking about the Mad Lions versus SK game, by the way.
Yeah.
That was the game he was referring to.
Wait.
Oh, you're back.
There we go. You lagged a second there, mate. We heard you start saying about the SK game. It was actually the SK versus Mad Lions game. What was the point you were making about when you face LeBlanc and Lee Sin?
Oh, so basically the mid jungle 2v2 was just really hard to play for Diana. And at some point, like when you're 0-2 as Diana, your all-in damage is not high enough anymore, and suddenly you're just out of the game. Like that, it's a really 1-0 champion. So when you pick her, you have to know what you're doing with her, and you have to be aware of the mid jungle 2v2 limitations, and you have to be able to actually abuse that matchup. That's about it. So it's not a pick that is as universal as some people make it out to be, but it's a pick that has its kind of pick potential.
I've never been really a big fan of Diana as a champion, because I feel like she's very straightforward and doesn't allow you to be very creative in a lot of the plays you're making. And if you fall behind, she doesn't have the necessary damage to really get into the backline and assassinate somebody, which is kind of her only purpose, besides maybe the bringing people together in order to get some sort of AoE wombo combo. But there are better engage champs than that to use. So I just think she's really binary overall.
I mean,
so
you don't want that as your mid laner. Like,
yeah.
If your mid lane role is like, you're going to be my engage. Like, Ornn is kind of an exception because he's like a big fatty tank. But if you're like, I'm going to pick this no damage mid laner that's not tanky because it has like setup, I don't know. I mean, I think it to me, it feels kind of like an Echo style. Where I've seen it, it's like the counter pick into Rumble. And like you said, like Rumble can't play his like normal trade pattern because he can, it's easy gank setup and she can always trade back. But I still run into like the same like issue where it's like you're still running Rumble versus Diana into a team fight at 8 minutes at Herald, like at least. And that's where I'm like, I still want that Rumble unless this Diana, like, I have the, Diana Lee Sin or Diana Lee Sin are like hard camping or something. Actually, Diana Lee sounds bad. So it's like
Rumble has been losing a ton of priority actually in Europe. People have not been picking Rumble as often anymore.
Yeah, I noticed that.
They have actually dropped prior simply because of like those 1-1 matchups that are just horrific for him in certain scenarios, the mid 2v2s that he cannot play. And now the next nerf too. So I guess it's region specific, I think in NA especially, because I know this from last year too. Like if you don't get a held, you lose the game. So I think those
that was Rumble top though.
Yeah, but those Rumble Kianas are really hitting hard. So it's definitely something that I think is more region specific. I think in EU people are a lot more individualistic. So I think the matchups are and the 2v2s I think are a lot more important than the actual team fight ability.
Okay, yeah, because I say NA usually goes into we're fighting somewhere, and that's where it's like, well, I have a Rumble. I think the big issue where Rumble's not performing well or doesn't have like a crazy win rate in LCS is just the people who are playing Rumble aren't good at Rumble yet. Like, I mean, the TL game yesterday where Jensen was playing Rumble, that's like maybe the worst Rumble I've seen in a long time. And I don't think many people wanted to talk about it or highlight it, but it was pretty rough. And I guess if it's being permabanned, it might be hard to get practice on it. But I mean, that's a champion that you have like false confidence in because you just you spam your buttons, right? It's resourceless. So you're like, oh look, I'm winning lane, I'm doing good. Someone CCs, I can use a Rumble ult, but like when you have to, I don't know, when you actually have to play it on stage and play it well, like it really exposes like how you actually can play that champion wrong, like really easily.
I think for me, it's also part of a natural evolution away from doing some of these early river engagements. So as we have seen teams deprioritize early Drakes, like being totally fine giving up the first two because we know they don't add a lot statistically at this point in time, and saying, okay, we're just going to try and take some fights later for Drakes around the soul that actually are much more impactful. Yeah. I think if you're just going to capitulate and say, well, we know this Drake is invaluable, and what has Rumble always been good at? It's been about controlling early objectives into the mid game, and because he does fall off later. So if you're just saying we are going to give up the Drakes early and you force Rumble to either play for the Herald or not care about taking those Drakes, then I think he actually does lose a lot of his impact in the game naturally. If you're just smart about how you play around him and you just don't opt into those fights.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that EU is really good at. I think, especially due to leading the charge to a certain extent, where they just give up early Herald, early Dragons in order to basically get tempo on the map.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically the entire play. And I think that's something that is like more LEC specific too, where we prioritize tempo all the time above like the actual objective. Because if you get the objective, you sacrifice tempo for it, you probably never get it back. And Rumble, at least, like, to me, now feels like a pick that is like situational. It has to be really well prepared and has to be utilized in, let's say, in a three-man dive scenario early game, where you have his priority being used, for example, to dive top lane or to dive bot lane, something like that. So you have to really make use of him even before the level 6 mark, which should actually be his strong point.
What do you think on that, P0lly? Like the characterization there, where like in EU they prefer like the tempo over the objective as a general, obviously a very, very broad stroke when we say that.
I mean, I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. I would say like I wouldn't put Rumble in this spot where I'm like, I have to be taking these dragon fights, because dragon's super weak. So if I have Rumble, I don't have to give up much. I can just be like, all right, let's get bot prio 3v3, and my jungle support is gonna go duo dragon. I'm gonna push mid, push bot, and I have Rumble. I think as long as you don't fuck up the Herald play, that's gonna be your big gold lead. I wouldn't say like, yeah, I'm gonna pick Rumble because I can get my first dragons. I think I'm gonna scare you off of taking dragons, and I can take them when I want without like sacrificing too much tempo or anything like that. And I would keep the game based around like mid to bot plays, where I can get my swap off on Herald. Because if I get prio bot once around the 7:30 mark before bot lane hits 6, if I get my swap off first, I'm gonna force a Herald fight. And that's where I would want to break up in the game if I had Rumble. I wouldn't be too obsessed with like, I need to stack Drakes. It'd be more like, I can play the game however I want. If you start Drake, I can probably kill you. So you're not going to start it, and I just need to work around getting to this Herald fight quickly. Because that's the Herald fight 8 minutes is, bot lanes are most of the time level 5. So if I bring my like level 7 Rumble, and I ult your, then we have like a little 5v5, I can like solo win the game there.
It's actually, like, the more I think about, like, when I noticed last year too, is like that these kind of like plays that have to be almost like pre-set up, right? In it's like something that I've noticed a lot, where even other teams, obviously from Scrim Dignitas last year, remember the whole like
10 minutes.
10 minutes, they're out of sight. It doesn't matter what happens.
You know it's going.
So like bot lane's always a swap. So you actually have, like, in an A, it's like both teams are just shaking hands. They're like, okay, meet you at 10 minutes at the top side, or now 8 minutes, and we'll fight no matter what. And whoever is stronger wins the team fight. So I think in EU, like, people even in these kind of scenarios, they more think about like, hey, we don't have to be first on the swap. If we can get tempo, that's good. I mean, if we can get tempo on what side, that's obviously the main priority. But we are not always going to be swapping within that one very moment. We can also contest the Herald by simply like pushing our bot lane again, and then having, for example, the support and ADK move from bottom after now another priority. So it's like there are a lot of ways that I think. Yeah, there are ways to counter these Herald fights if you want to, but I do think that Rumble itself is like a pick that, just like to cap it off, like, it's like either you know how to use them like from the very get-go, and you're able to play it like really, really well, because this laning phase is not as easy as it seems, and you make use of him, or you just don't and you lose out, because mid to late game he's honestly something you can really avoid, especially in open fields.
I mean,
by the way, Monty, sorry, go ahead. Go on, Paul.
I was just gonna say, like, the handshake for Herald, I don't know if it's completely a handshake, because if I'm the team with tempo and I get my push bot and reset, if I go top, I think you don't have a good play if you're behind on tempo. I think you have to follow me now.
Yeah.
And I think you have to go top. So I mean, I think it's mostly like the teams that are ahead are using this 8-minute swap. I think if I'm the one with tempo and I'm ahead and I go bot again, I can play the game slightly different. So if I'm playing against Rumble and I have bot tempo, I can probably play it in a way to avoid Herald. But if I have bot prio, so I'm playing like Sinatom Kinch and Rumble, something like that, if I can get the push off and reset bot, or actually like the Philios Thresh would be better. Yeah, I'm going to give myself a Philios Thresh and Rumble. I'm the fucking draft king, by the way. If I get that, like, I actually don't know what you're going to be able to counterplay my early game with. That seems like, I know that's very, very crazy draft. But,
Well, the problem is, I understand what you're saying, but these are such niche situations, because when you're talking about getting the swap and then getting the 5v5 around Herald, it requires the other team to opt into that engagement. in a lot of ways, right? So in a way, it seems like everything has to go super well for you in order for that to happen. And I'm not saying it's not a strong pick, but I think it's perhaps a little bit overvalued because of the way the game has to play out. It's like you see that happen once and you're just like, damn, like, wow, that was so strong. Let's pick it every game. But the reality of getting into that situation is actually quite complicated and isn't going to happen with any level of consistency.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing we're also like not talking much about is like Rumble still is a flex. So like if you want to counter pick a mid, it's like you're going to have to last pick your mid lane now. If you want to do the Echo Diana counter pick, because you can't just pick Echo Diana on 4 and expect them to just put Rumble mid no matter what. So like that big advantage I think still exists. And then I still think he's a solid top laner. I think he has a lot of good options, and I've always been a huge Rumble fan, so I'm like super biased. Like his team fight's just great, his lane's great, so I always want to pick him no matter what. So now that he's here, I'm like, keep picking him, please. I just want to see it forever.
Right, Monty, I want to ask you something, and this is a totally disingenuous question. I already know what the answer is, but I'm going to pretend like I'm curious. Like, what did you think in that 100 Thieves versus Team Liquid game when they had all the super minions, but they still wanted a Baron as well? They were like, why not have it all, ladies? Like, you can work and have a kid at home. Like, what did you think of that? Like, as someone who spent so much of his
they had two 50-50 Barons.
As someone who spent so much of his career stressing the premise of win conditions, what did you think of this?
So they had two 50-50 Barons. That was actually the second 50-50 Baron of that game. So it wasn't even the number one. But literally when their entire base is just a giant train wreck and you have all the inhibitors down and you're trying to do Baron. So first off, we can even argue if you should do Baron at all, right? Because is Baron really helping you win in that scenario? Maybe not. Okay, so you're going to go do Baron anyway. Maybe it's just the safety so that you can go in with all these super minions, get the Baron buff, and just make sure you win the game. All right, I'm with you. Then you're going to go to the Baron, and you're going to not wait for the super minions to put pressure on their Nexus, and you're going to 50-50 it and then lose the Baron. Right. That was like such a just appalling shot calling. Which is disappointed because I feel like 100 Thieves actually played out the early game super well. And then it was smart, it was tight, and then they made some really dumb mistakes. Now, the positive I will say is like, it's a lot harder to get your team to do the good stuff early. And that mistake is so easily coachable and they still won, so it's kind of forgivable. It's not the end of the world, but it was infuriating in that moment to watch because you just want to see this team play a complete game, because that's been 100 Thieves' problem, is that they've been really inconsistent even when they've been able to be ahead, and they're almost always ready, holding that gun aimed squarely at their foot and just kind of taunting their fans and, daring to pull the trigger, right?
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, in that kind of scenario, if you want to leave the base once you have 3 inhibs, your goal is not Baron. Your goal is, I'm going to make you leave your base, and your base is dead now.
Yes.
If you stay in your base, then I get Baron. If you leave your base, then I'm just going to look at you. Like, we're going to stare at each other, and I'm going to press S, and then you're going to lose. So you do something now. So I like the pressure that what it puts on, but it is like a level of discipline where you're like, I'm not actually going to do this. I'm just making you follow me. And then once you get there, you're like, I guess we can just do it. And then they just
because the part that obviously makes no sense is like, you want to just pause the game and be like, what do you actually need that Baron for? What is it going to do? Like, I'm just saying,
what do you mean? It's
your stats.
for the stats, yeah. For the stats.
Well, it's just I just hate watching these teams teams do this because it's very simple. How you just need to focus on how to actually win the game. Baron is a means to winning. Taking Baron does not win you the game, right? That is not the action. Having Baron can cause you to win the game. But if you don't need the Baron to win, then you should not be going for the Baron, period. You need to focus on taking objectives and destroying their Nexus. And at that point in time, it's like they forgot how to win a game of League of Legends, and it's disappointing.
Well, Team Liquid made the same mistake against Dignitas too, where they actually had 3 inhibs and they're on top side. And it was essentially like Dignitas had 1 chance to fight, and they didn't have like a Ornn or like guaranteed engage. And if Team Liquid did not step up into the base, Dignitas would have no option to engage, and then the game would just kind of naturally be destroyed by the super minions. But I remember like Aftermoon noticed this situation and he flash hooked and got Nautilus. And if that hook doesn't land or if Nautilus is a little bit further back, the game is just gonna end. Like there's too much like stats on the minions for you to actually like fight back. And that was one of the moments where yeah, it's 3 inhibs down, and you're putting yourself in a spot where like people can contest you. When you have 3 inhibs, it's not 5v5 anymore. It's 6 or 7 versus 5 maybe. And that's the thing you need to abuse because you can't lose with that kind of style. I will say I do see G2 in situations like this, and they'll go take the Nash. But then they'll like outplay the team fight, and I'm like, that play wasn't good, but you guys are fucking so good at the game, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Basically,
that's the infuriating
one of
thing
those
about
disclaimers. You know, like one of those ones they put on like shows for kids. Yeah, like this is only professionals are allowed. Like this is a team that was in the World's Finals, guys. You guys just do your shit. They're allowed to do whatever they want, basically.
But you know, people are watching that and they're like, "Oh shit, what a great like G2's amazing. Look, they're making this play. They're doing Baron, and the minions are killing the base. Like, what can you do against it?" And I'm sitting there like, "Oh my god, if G2 if all their PCs like disconnected." That's a better play than finishing that Nash right now.
Yeah. Funniest thing about this is it's like something I heard all of last year from you actually. All these things, you know, like it's coming back. It's coming back. I'm getting flashbacks from all scrims.
I think the way you describe that, the way you actually like visualize that for them is well said though. Probably like what you should do is think of it as extra people on your team. Basically, you have a numbers advantage sort of. So there's no point just playing it out like it's still 5 versus 5. Hence why you might want to bait them into a Baron fight. Why would you? It's like there's a saying in most sports similar. Like in a lot of sports, you use the out of bounds line as an extra defender. That way you only have to defend this side because you can't go that way. It's like these things actually do help like the player conceptualize basically how to play out the scenario, because if he thinks it's just a wide open game with a million options, you can make all the wrong options. In this scenario, actually, your options are pretty limited if you just identify what the game state is.
Yeah, you just want to like really focus on those kind of, or that's like one thing that I really enjoyed doing was finding these concepts that like, it's no longer about like doing something like inventive or anything. It's just like, there's just something on the map, like a numerical advantage on the map that there's no counterplay. Like there's nothing that they can do, however good they might be relative to you, that they can like defeat you in this situation. So putting your team in that one or in a situation like that is like always a goal of what I'd like to do. But then once they're in that and then they make the like 50-50 choice or something, it's like, I'm not sure how to explain it differently to like convince you that this is a good play, you know?
No, it's definitely something that, like, I feel like so many people, like players are struggling with. They actually don't understand these concepts, like, because they're so, like, almost like in the game that they cannot step out of it and just be like, hey, okay, we have ABC happening, this is what we're going for right now, and these are the conditions that are there. It's a 90-10 play if we do this. It's a 50-50 play if we do this. They just can't conceptualize it. It's actually beyond my mind-boggling how oftentimes I encounter this. Like, it's not even like, I'm not even saying this about my team. I'm just saying, like, even last year, honestly.
No,
like,
of course.
Like,
yeah.
Of course.
I mean, what I understand what you mean by that is like if you took exactly the same players we're talking about that were in this game and did the wrong thing, but you had them in the demo review and you were like, look, guys, what you would have done. I bet a bunch of them could identify it, but it's like the second one champion in League of Legends touches the Baron, like everyone loses their fucking mind. It's like, like Cloud music starts playing and people just do crazy shit. Like stuff just goes differently, and that's not like, you know, it's like the moth to the flame. They can't. People who start like, mate, as soon as that Baron health gets below half, to convince someone to get off that Baron at that point in time is so hard. It doesn't matter if they can just like see the enemy. It's like oh, they're coming. I can never possibly do it in time. It's like, but what if I still try? It's like, why? Every coach in the world, like, no.
I mean, I think part of what makes it really difficult to like learn and execute properly is when the game ends or when you rewatch that play, it's so obvious to the player that they don't take it like as a huge mistake because they're like, oh yeah, I know that.
They think, I would remember.
I would never do that again. That was so stupid.
It just like when you see it again, you're just like, no, but I just wasn't thinking at that time. Like you make so many excuses for like why it was okay to happen that time because you're winning, you know, blah blah blah. But then it happens again, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is actually this is a really hard concept to like learn.
Well, here's the analogy. I'll give you the analogy, right? is if you ever go out and you get way too drunk, right? And then next morning you got a hangover. What do you always say? You go, oh, I'm never going to do that again. And what happens is you don't. This is what people don't get. It's a great analogy here, Paul, because nobody plans in that scenario to get like way too drunk and have a really terrible time. You very rarely actually go out with that plan. What happens is you go out and you think, you know what? I can have a couple of drinks. I'm a responsible adult, you know. You have a couple, you get talking to someone. You know what? One more won't hurt. I'm feeling fine at the moment. 3 or 4 drinks in. The problem is the guy who's 3 or 4 drinks in now starts making way different decisions than the guy who's had no drinks in. And the problem is that guy always fucks you, and that guy appears at some point in time if you allow him to appear. So you unfortunately have to get way ahead of him and cut him off at the pass way before then. Otherwise, he starts ordering, you know what, tequilas for everyone actually next round. Like, and then you wake up the next morning, well, I thought I said I'd never do that again. Like, that's what happens. All these teams think they're going to bait a Baron. Mate, you're not baiting a Baron if you end up trying to do it. Like, I'm just going to say that. There's a little rule for you guys out there.
So it's like as soon as they like are killing the inhibitors, they're like taking shots.
Exactly. Yes.
So what is 3 inhibs? I'm 6 shots in.
Exactly.
What are we calling this? Because I feel like this is a great analogy and a great term. Are we calling it like the Baron hangover or getting Baron wasted? I don't know. What is it? What is it, Thorin?
I like Baron wasted.
Baron wasted.
Exactly.
Because I do think that is a thing that happens, and it is just the point of no return, right? You're saying probably, you know, you're taking shots as you're getting in the base, but by the time you get to the Baron, you're like, well, I'm just going to keep on drinking. Like, we've already passed the point of no return. The Baron event horizon has been crossed. You're getting sucked into the black hole.
Yeah. It's like water now. Like, what? I'm not going to be wasted. Come on.
Yeah. Baron, chat says Baron Blackout or Baron Goggles, which are also pretty good.
Oh, Baron Goggles is pretty good. I like that one.
Yes, Baron Goggles.
It's like the idea you're like, that fucking Baron looks great right now. And they're like, nah, it's not, there's no value to it. What are you talking about? I think he wants me. I think he wants me to come on. I'll show him. You think you can tell me not to hit that Baron? Like,
Oh man.
I love it. So with that,
that's also the name of this episode, by the way, Baron Goggles.
Baron Goggles. We did it. We got it. All right. We're going to take a break to go to the bathroom, get drinks, whatever. And we also have the C9 roundup for you, so you guys can enjoy that in the meantime. Howdy there, buckaroos and buckarettes. Welcome back to another episode of the Cloud9 Roundup. Your favorite part of the Nines, I know. And I see you there, spamming that K-Kona and saying hell yeah? Well, cut it out and listen up, because we've got some big news in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Now, I reckon if you're watching this show with me and Thorin, you might really like to see the new project we're working on, Flashpoint. Guess what? Thorin's the creative director, and I'm helping him out with all kinds of things. Not only that, but it's going to be my first time casting Counter-Strike, and Cloud9 is a founding member, so you can look forward to Cloud9's new CSGO roster strutting their stuff in the server when Flashpoint starts in March. Not only that, but we're going to see Cloud9 at IEM Katowice. Their first opponents is going to be Astralis. Now, Astralis, awfully tough team, but they didn't look so good at Blast, so maybe there's a chance for that upset. What's more, Cloud9's player, Mixwell, has been dropped from the roster. Don't worry, it won't affect that starting 5 that we've come to see in the recent weeks, but it is time for another CS organization to get a top-tier player. So if you're out there, phone Mixwell up. If you're watching the Nines Summoning Insight, you probably like a little League of Legends. And if you like a little League of Legends, you probably like some good League of Legends. And you know who's been playing some good League of Legends? That's right, it's Cloud9. They are now 6-0, first place in the spring split of the LCS. And you know what? It hasn't even been close. They've just been dumpstering teams left and right, to the degree that our boy Sven, well, he's only got 1 death this entire season so far. And that means that he was the MasterCard Player of the Week for last week. Got a little tiny statue of himself to show off. Now, it wasn't all good in League of Legends, though. We did see the Academy team for Cloud9, long the best up-and-coming showcase of North American players. They've been struggling a little bit. They lost to Dignitas Academy and 100 Thieves Academy this last week, putting them on 2-4 on the season overall. While League of Legends and Counter-Strike have been going mighty fine for Cloud9 as of late, you might have seen some games from the London Spitfire in the Overwatch League in their opening weekend. Unfortunately, they lost to the NYXL and the Paris Eternal. But this is a team full of rookies, 12 players on this roster. Now, they've got a lot of time to mix things up and get some more experience. The games were closer than most people expected, given the level of experience on this roster. So, it'll be a long season for the Spitfire, plenty of time to gel and make up that ground and get some wins in the coming weeks. Also, Cloud9's new Dota team, well, they won't be playing in the LA Major. They dropped out early in the qualifiers, unfortunately. But at least we've got some real cool Dota banners in the game, though. More bad news came in Rocket League. Rocket League did some great viewership in the opening weekend, but unfortunately the Cloud9 team did lose 0-3 to E United. It's not all bad, though. Jay Schritt, the teamfight tactics player for Cloud9, now, he got married to his new wife, Kate. We'd like to offer a big congratulations to the newlywed couple. If you're looking to spice up your wardrobe for the spring, well, it might be about time to mosey on over to the Cloud9 website and pick up that Puma game day gear. Hoodies, pants, it's all there, it's comfortable, and as the kids say, you'll be looking fly. I'm still waiting for that Cloud9 cowboy hat, but in the meantime, you can pick up that game day gear, and thanks to Puma. That just about does it for this week's version of Cloud9 Roundup. Thanks for staying with us, and we'll see you next week, partner.
All right, we're back. And I think this is an awesome time, actually, to see what teams people actually want to hear us talk about. So, as you know, Puma wants to give you a gift card if you are over 18 and live in North America. So use hashtag Puma and tell us the name of the team that you want us to talk about. And we'll pick from some of them and see what's going on. Because we can't talk about everybody, obviously. And you can win that gift card. So enjoy yourselves, chat. You have to use hashtag Puma so that we know which teams you want and we can give you a gift card. We're not talking about Unicorns of the Love, I'll tell you that right now. I suppose we can start with
CFG, please, someone.
No, I don't want to talk about that game that I saw last night. I'm not talking about that CLG Immortals game. That's been banned.
Wait, you watch that, Maurice?
A bit. I was pleasantly amazed. I was just amazed.
All right, let's talk about G2 to start things off, because they're pretty damn good. We talked about C9, who's the undefeated team in LCS. So now let's talk about G2 and how well they are doing over in the LEC right now.
They've also, by the way, just for anyone who really wants to like fully put the exclamation point on this, like the only teams they haven't played so far is Vitality and Mad Lions. Now, true, Mad Lions has actually been wait, am I missing one?
And us.
Oh no, sorry, they haven't played Misfits, Schalke, and Excel. I got that wrong actually. I was looking at the wrong name. So, like, except for the fact that Misfits have actually been pretty decent, they've already beat all the good teams. Like, the hype that anyone's actually better than them is basically dead already. Like, all those marquee matchups have been and gone now. So, G2's just the best as usual. Same old shit, except slightly different position on the map that two of the players play. That's it. They're still the best. Why? Why can no one beat the Maurice?
I think first of all, the vast amount of experience obviously helps them throughout the game. But it's just the fact that I think they're one of the only teams that plays above fundamentals. So every team in EU, like, they're actually struggling with fundamentals, which is basically like something like TB plays, like utilizing lane pass properly, swapping at the correct times. That's something that EU teams are already like honestly failing at. And G2 is so far ahead that they're now playing above fundamentals. So they're anticipating what the actual fundamental play is. And then they basically counterplay that. So I think that's like the next step to being a great team, right? They kind of know what the enemy is doing. They always know where the enemy is going, what the next play is, and they are really able to counterplay that. In the beginning of the split, they were somewhat weakish, I'd say, where they had a couple of bad games where they played individually bad in the beginning, but still, mid to late game, their silent control, their ability to actually manipulate the enemy into doing what they want them to do is honestly still incredible to me.
I mean, we talked about it earlier too, but it's their flexibility, and yeah, we can say that picking set last is, you know, a luxury for them, but understanding the game well enough that it would be effective in that situation was, I think, very impressive. And it consistently surprises me how smart they are about understanding their win conditions and then also having the champion pools to flex these champions into very weird positions to match win conditions or to exploit the weaknesses of their opponents. They are just incredibly intelligent. Yeah, they just kind of amaze me, honestly.
Probably one thing that I know is often really tough for fans to understand is like what coaches can actually coach in the game. Because I have to say, I'm not taking anything away from Grabs as a coach, but a lot of the things that amaze me about G2 are things where it's like in a game state that there's no way you prepared for that to happen. Like the team themselves in the moment have made a read on the map state or what they can do at a certain point with tempo if they do this fight here. Some of the stuff they're making, like there's almost no way the coach could be coaching some of this stuff, right? Like unless it's just more generally common as principles through VOD review or something.
No, I mean, I think it's, concepts that they understand really, really well. I guess like the only comparison I'll say is like the Baron one I was talking about, where the concept is you want to take them out of the base. So when we're talking about that, it's very focused around like, we're talking about Baron, but like this can be applied to like Elder Drake, blue buff. This could be applied to like vision control. Like there's too many things that this can be applied to. And I think that's what G2 does really well and why they can like play this kind of like free flowing game where it's almost like, okay, when you have a numbers advantage, you want to fight, right? But what G2 understands is like that is applicable in every way as long as you're within engaged range. So it's less about like waiting to group and more of like, if I see you leave, this is the same as if I got someone to join me.
There we go.
So a lot of times I'll see a team leaving an area, right? So they're like, the enemy team's groups, and then they start spreading out. And then the second they spread out, I see G2 like collapse. So before it was they had a numbers disadvantage and they were chilling. And then the second something else happens, now they're like coming up. And that's something that a lot of teams don't do because it doesn't look like a mistake, right? The team was grouped as 4 and then they split off into the river. Like who would say that's wrong for them to do? Like no one. But as soon as G2 sees that, they walk up. And now if the enemy team doesn't like immediately realize, okay, we're not grouped anymore, I'm not going to be able to outplay this, that's when like G2 just crushes. Yeah. And that's a lot of the times where they get these advantages. I'm just like, holy shit, like I don't know how they got there. And I think what Grabs probably does well is he's not, I'm assuming, right? He's not super hands-on about that kind of stuff. And I think that's the correct approach. I think a coach could really fuck up G2 if they were doing the wrong thing. So like give Grabs a lot of credit for that, where it's like, I think he's doing well knowing what his place is on the team.
Yeah.
And I think, for example, like, if I were to coach G2, I would probably not do anything I've ever done with any team. I would probably like just scratch all the things I thought I knew about coaching and try something brand new, because I'm like, if I treat them like I've treated every other team, like I might just fuck up their flow, how they do stuff, because it's very,
it's totally unique.
I'm not, I don't want to like, overhype it too much, but it's this like kind of artistic flow of how they're thinking about the game. Like it's very, stream of consciousness, where it's like, this is the correct play now because this just happened. And it's not about like, oh, they're splitting up, we can move up here 2 degrees this way.
Sure.
No, they just see it happen and they have good body language, where like they see their friend move up and they're like, okay, he's moving up because I know why, and then they can go together and do stuff. So no, the way G2 plays is, I think you can't replicate it, you can't really copy it, and I think they're really fun to study. I do think they make a lot of like those kind of mistakes I was mentioning, where it's like they have the game like super locked, no way that they need to outplay them anymore, but they opt for like, I'm gonna outplay you, and sometimes it fucks up, but I do like that their like willingness to always be doing that.
Well, the thing is, they always get back into the game, though. That's the issue, is that there have been a couple close games that we've seen in the LEC versus G2. Some of them were deceptively close. Like I said earlier, the Rogue game I think was deceptively close because it was just about outlasting them, and then there really wasn't any competition in the late game. That was like a game that would have given Rogue fans a lot of false hope, but I think if you understand how that draft operated, it was going to be very difficult for Rogue to win if they didn't just completely close the game early. But there have been other games where it was kind of miraculous that they came back. Look at that first game they played against Mad Lions in week 1, where that one was a game that they probably should have lost, but they are so good at being able to come back in. And I think what's
that bot turret dive one?
I don't know what that bot's turret dive one was.
They're losing the game really hard, and then they had this like crazy like 5-0, like 3K gold down, and then like 5-0 kind of thing.
Yes, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think what's so impressive to me is that not only do you have like the level of game knowledge that all of the players have, it's not like there's one person telling them what to do. It's that they all possess an incredibly high game sense about the state of everything. And when like you're saying, when one person moves forward, it's not that everyone has the same knowledge. It's that there is a trust that that person has that knowledge, so you will follow up, right? But that only works if you all have insane game sense and you all trust that the other people have insane game sense, right? To me, that's really what's amazing, is that level of trust combined with that collective knowledge of the game is all flowing through it, right? So it's like you said, it's inexplicable. It seems like it would be very impossible to coach them in a traditional sense, because anything you do to mess with that process will cause problems.
Yeah.
That's why I always thought it was so fun that they were always beating the Koreans, because I just imagined it must have been such a nightmare when those Koreans were trying to do the VOD review. Like, so what was their game plan coming in here? It's like, you guys, no paradigm for how you think Elite Engines is never going to encompass what G2 doing right. It's the bad scenario for you.
Yeah, you can't get a read on them. That's the issue. Is they're too flexible and they're too liquid in the game. They sort of unlike Team Liquid, but like an actual liquid, they change their shape to the container, right? And if we consider the container as the comps or the game state, they will change their playstyle to match that in infuriating ways. Trying to lock down what G2 is really, really hard. Because I wouldn't even say G2 has a style. Their style is just whatever they want it to be in that moment. It's very impressive.
I mean,
it's
I think
Proto Liquid Chaos style.
Like what you kind of mentioned, where they're liquid and they can kind of shape. Like, this is one thing that I actually wouldn't even begin how to like help a player be better at it. Is like when they have item spikes, they can actually go from a very passive team like farming until they like hit this like spike where they know they're stronger, and then they turn like super aggressive. Like that kind of like mentality change where like let's wait to like, all right, let's go. Like, that's a really hard jump in the game. Like, you see a lot of games that are really slow, and then something like snaps and like breaks the game open. That's mostly because the teams got into this like false sense of like lull, like the game is going slow. So, oh shit, someone flashed on me, and they don't react quickly. Like, G2 is like very different in the way where it's like as soon as they get what they wanted, which is like item spike or a level, like something that you don't know, they'll like turn and be really aggressive.
Sure.
Yeah. And watching that's really hard. And then one thing that G2 does that's like super infuriating that I'll never understand is they'll be sitting on like 4K gold, and then they won't reset. And then someone is going to be like, oh wait, they just took like 3 towers, they're going to reset. And then they like walk into the jungle, and then G2 kills them. And I'm like, I don't know if I could ever tell my players like, hey, you have 3,000 gold, don't go to the base, just stay there, stay on the map. That would be such a hard concept to like convince someone of. But when G2 does it, I'm just like, dude, I never want to play against G2. I don't want to do. I'm sorry, Maurice, you have to play against them because Jesus, I don't know. I would be too scared all the time.
So basically, when you do a good job, P0lly, coaching all these young players on when to reset responsibly, that would actually essentially coach them to get ultra fucked by G2.
Yeah, no, I'd be like, all right, you guys have like, ooh, G2 just took these 3 towers. You probably have some tempo in the game. You guys should go get some vision right now. And then my players will go get vision, and then I'll die to G2, and I'm like, all right, don't listen to me anymore. Your coach is a moron. We're playing G2. Just do the opposite of what I say. Yeah, good job, guys.
But I actually think I wouldn't say they're predictable, but I do think that they're more conventional than people make them out to be. I think a lot of the plays, especially in the early game, are kind of like really obvious that they're doing. Like, they always go for the waves that are pushing in. They always like defend the waves that are pushing out. So they make sure that at least in the early game, they're really honestly basic. They're not doing anything special. And they use their powers really well. And I think later on in the game, I think it's more about they're just able to read the enemy's tempo really well and know how much they have to fuck with it in order to basically gain an advantage out of it again. So it's it's a hard concept to grasp, but I think it's like something. I think if you were, for example, working with them, I think you'd actually understand them. That's what I feel. And if you watch the games continuously and you actually interact like with players on a similar level, maybe a lot more, then maybe like it's easier to understand too. But I do think that they're great and they're really, really good, obviously. But I do think that there's a limit that even they saw last year towards Worlds, towards the semis, that was really that was there. It was not even a mechanical limit. It was more like, actually, it may have been a mechanical limit that was actually kind of put up where against SKT, if I remember the series correctly, I think at some point they evaded team fighting completely because they knew their team fight coordination wasn't as good as, for example, SKT's was. So they reverted back to 1-1 all the time, and then against FPX, they didn't have the ability to actually do that at all. They couldn't even evade the team fights anymore because FPX was just brute forcing. So I think G2, to put it bluntly, is like a group of really, really good players that are obviously fundamentally sound. They know everything about the game. They have really good game sense, but they're also pretty much people that you have to call on their bluffers all the time. Like if you don't call them on the bluffers, if you don't call them like this is for sure wrong, you cannot get away with this, and you let them get away with that, is when they win the game. And I think that's something that especially SKT and FPX kind of showed last year. Where SKT, for example, I think I saw the support flashing over wards in order to catch Perks, in order to kill him because he was pushing a side lane when they were taking an objective, that kind of stuff. You really have to really push onto them and make sure that you don't give them any leeway to almost bluff or bullshit against you.
I will say, like, they're an example of a team where, like, at this event I was referring to at the beginning of the show, where I'm doing a CSGO event at the moment where I've been over in London. One of the things that's been really cool is, unlike every other event I've ever done in CSGO, for this one, we actually get the comms of the teams as the analysts. And if we want, we can just listen to one or the other. And it's super useful. Like, you know, you get, the whole point is, whereas you're still seeing the same tactic in the game, you want to know, like, was that a call? Was one of that just a play that someone randomly made? And so it's like the actual like context it gives you can be super fascinating, and how you model the players and the team. So I'd love to, if you could actually hear the comms of what the G2 players are doing. Because that's why I kind of see what Maurice is saying here. Like, if you knew who made the call or what they saw or what they communicated like 10 seconds before they did a move, I think that's where you would really get a sense of like how much of this is really just impromptu, or how much maybe they were setting some of it up a minute before and they were actually reading the game so well, like they know if this happens we can do this next. Like, I'd love to know how much actual thought goes into the moves they do.
Well, I think we can have one of them on the show at some point and we could just ask them.
Yeah, but that's also one thing that is genius about what they do, Monty, is the other thing is, because they flex so hard into the whole banter angle, they make themselves, I'll give you a great analogy, a sports analogy, right? So the legendary basketball player from the 80s, Larry Bird, people used to actually say that because he came from like Louisiana, where a lot of people are considered to be like hicks, you know, they're like farm boys and like, hey, Matt, you might have fan around here, whatever the fuck like accent they have there, right? The joke was Larry Bird would purposely like lay that on really thick. So, and they even had the nickname the Hick from French Lick, because he wanted you to think he was an idiot and that he was just doing stuff by accident. But actually, he was like a super cerebral basketball player. And the joke was he was hiding behind that. So you'd think he just got lucky when he did something like, oh, how did he know that? So they almost do that with the meme stuff. Like they make it seem like Grabs just, you know, like throws out the fucking randomizer on the draft, and then we play whatever this idiot's playing. Then I don't know, Yankos, what's he do? Where's he in my lane? Like, they make it seem like it's all some clown fiesta. Like, how did we win all these games again? Meanwhile, they are doing all this like next level shit in the game. It's like they're just fucking with us all.
It is. It's true. It is like they do have that sort of meme troll shield that they can hide behind at all times, and it is sometimes hard to tell whether their drafts or their decisions are serious or whether they just know they're so good that they can get away with it.
They arguably also have the 4 best players in the league. Like, so that doesn't like. I mean, Mickey's the only one where I'm like, he's not top. I wouldn't put him at the top like just as the other players, but like Wunder is the best top laner. Like Junkers is like the best jungler. Perks is best mid laner and AD carry actually. Like,
weirdly enough, yeah.
And Caps is for sure the best mid. I'm not sure about AD carry, but he's getting there. So it's like, what the hell are you gonna do against that? You know, like they bought out Exodia. That's what they did, and it's really hard to actually do anything against it.
Does anybody know when their contracts are up? Because I'm really curious what happens.
Are you starting poach already, or?
No. I'm just curious what's going to happen when their contracts do get up, because I would think that Perks is probably on his way to the fattest contract for a Western player in history.
Gotta be.
2022.
I mean, he probably already is on a pretty good contract. I would not put it past him.
But yeah, I've heard he's on a very good one. But I put it this way, I would say this as well. Like the other thing about their team is they do have like you're saying here, it's ridiculous the amount of like abundance of riches they have in terms of like the number of quality players. Like you could take Wonder and put him in a team and just play hard around top and give him all the resources, and he'd be like the MVP of the league. But he doesn't even do that half the time in G2. Like half the time he's just picking like a lane where they play. Like he's played half of the Soraka games in the entire league because then he just does it in his own style. It's like they don't even have to play around him necessarily. So like it is almost unfair the players they have. Like they are pretty fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many threats. You know, what are you gonna who are you gonna stomp in that game?
Yeah.
Maybe you can pick one lane and then you lose the other 2 lanes.
Yeah.
And then they react accordingly, correctly, and do the play later on that wins the game anyway. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, yeah, Maurice, you mentioned like, yeah, the early game I don't think is anything like insane or like next level. I think that's where people can like get their advantages and leads. Is like you can challenge them in the early game, even though they are very talented individually. But yeah, once they start moving around the map and like doing like coordinating things, it really does feel like when they're fighting 3v3s, like each player has 12 abilities. It's like I don't really feel like they're playing their one champion. It's like if I'm Perks, I'm using like this guy's abilities and this guy's abilities when I play. So it feels like when they fight, it does seem like the coordination and when they want to go in and out is like really fluid.
There's one team that I remember against OG when I think they traded 2 for 0 at the Herald. And just the things that especially Perks did, like throughout that team fight, was something that so many players would just not do. He WR'd as LeBlanc onto the enemy AD carry, ignited him, so he's out of the fight. It didn't even matter if the AD carry could still team. If the AD carry had any kind of positioning, he just made sure that they had to funnel into a certain area first, and then he WR'd instantly as soon as he saw the opportunity and ignited him too. So many people would not go for the chunk there, and they would not try to like basically push him out of the area because they were like, oh, we're just waiting to kill them. But Perks and like the whole of G2, they actually understand also like not just the damage limits, but also what certain chunks actually do to the enemy, like what it actually does to the enemy. So how the team fight position changes, like these kind of things. It's something that a lot of teams are actually not thinking about at all.
So another team that I think we should talk about a little bit because they have been underperforming is Team Liquid. They've been super struggling in the LCS, and I don't even think we can really say that it's because of a lack of Broxa at the current point in time. They went 0-2 this week versus 100 Thieves, and then they lost to Golden Guardians last night. We talked a little bit about Jensen's Rumble, and obviously there's all the jokes about Doublelift Senna. And Doublelift did play really badly last night in terms of getting all-in lane by FBI and Keith and getting caught out by that hook. And I don't think it really mattered what champion he was playing because it was a positional error. I don't think that they're in a space where Brox is going to fix this, but I think what people are also overlooking is that Spring Split is relatively meaningless, and it's possible that the team is not playing their hardest simply because they know Brox is coming, and they're sort of just in a holding pattern until that happens, and then maybe they try and get it together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a Surenfire problem at all or anything like that. I think it's just a 4-man problem, where like everything that they're doing right now is essentially like a bandage. Like, so all the effort they put in right now is like not going to translate into ability later on. So I think like subconsciously that really hurts their practice and their ability to play because they're like, well, I mean, we're playing with Shurn right now. Like, if I go carry him and we talk about like this thing, like in 3 weeks, all this effort I just put in is like completely gone. I'm not saying it's like the correct mindset, but I do think that's a big hindrance on them. I will say, I'm upset with CoreJJ a bit because I feel like he should be able to like solo carry Surenfire as like a jungle support duo. I think he has the ability to do that. And I would have liked to see that. I would say Doublelift has been hard underperforming, especially on Senna. Weird things about Senna is like, I don't know, first time I'm watching him play it, like he's one of the few Sennas that I don't see like constantly Q healing. Like sounds really goofy, but a lot of these Sennas, like, when they do well, it's like there's like a little skirmish, little fight, everyone trades like 200, 300 HP, and then the Senna Q heals, and then like now you have an advantage. And I'm watching like Doublelift just chill with his Q up, like not healing his jungler and stuff like that. So I think that's a pretty weird situation. Obviously like Jensen had that really bad game yesterday. I think Impact had another really bad game this weekend as well. Like all of them are taking turns having terrible games. And yeah, I think anyone who's blaming Surenfire, I think is really incorrect. Because I think any jungler put in that situation would have the same result. And I think Surenfire's in an extra shitty position because if they win, no one's gonna give him love. And if they lose, everyone's gonna be kind of focused on him. But I would say Team Liquid as a whole, I'm really betting on them to turn it around when Broxah like have this new like breath of fresh air. Because I don't know, if I think they're just gonna be shit, I'm gonna be really depressed about this league.
No,
it's gonna be like I watch Cloud9 and TSM. I'm really hoping TL can turn this around with Broxah. So I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that because I think it'll just make the league better.
I mean, there's too much talent on this roster for them to continue playing at this level. I really just think, regardless of what they're saying publicly about how much they're trying, it is hard to be motivated when you know Spring Split doesn't mean anything. And also, you're just waiting to build synergy with this jungler and so why would you put all of your effort into this point in time? You might as well just take it a little bit easier, not super care about the results, because like you're saying, a lot of the practice that you would be putting in now doesn't really go anywhere. So unfortunately, they were dealt a pretty raw hand when it came to the visa approval process, and they got screwed. And so I think it probably has at least if not a direct conscious effect on their effort, at least an unconscious effect on their effort going into these games, because the stakes are effectively meaningless. But I don't.
What about this though? Even though we're not setting it up that this is to blame Surenfire necessarily, do you think though that they are missing what Smithy brought to the team last year?
Yes. I mean,
yeah, Smithy was a big part of TL. I think was really underrated for sure.
Yeah. I mean, from playing against him, he was one of the few, like maybe one of the two junglers that I couldn't play against. It was both Svenskun and him, where like they did stuff that was just obviously the train of thought of the team, but they also made sure that I couldn't get any plays off. And I think that's something that like Smithy is really good at. He's not really, I wouldn't call him a great jungler. I would call him a great counter jungler, more or less. So he's basically anticipating what the enemy's supposed to do, and then he makes a play against it to a certain extent, and he's basically negating every effect he can have in the early game. So I think his stability is something that TL lacks right now, but I'm not sure how much of that is something that's going to be brought through Boxer. Whereas, because like last year he has been struggling, he obviously still went to Worlds, but he has obviously like had an off year on like so there's a reason why Fnatic doesn't want him anymore, at least for now, So I do think that he will fix some of the issues, but I think Smithy may be even more valuable than someone like Boxer because of that extra step of going the extra mile and helping everyone out on the team.
He's also domestic.
Yeah, sorry. Because I'll just say on that angle as well, when last year, in fact, for the last 2 years, Core JJ has always been like an MVP candidate player. One of the reasons why is people said, well, he's like the main shot caller of the team. And look at TL's macro was like supposedly the only good NA team in terms of macro. It's like people did act like Smithy wasn't on the map. It's like that guy pretty much seems to know always where to be, what to do. Like that seems like more of a duo to me. Like maybe it tips more slightly towards Core JJ. It seemed like he was the overall voice, but when you have two players that are super knowledgeable veterans like that, it's going to be very different from having one.
I mean, if it was, oh, good.
You go.
I was going to say, like, if it was more on Core JJ, then we would have seen that this split with Surenfire, because then it's like, okay, you can micro Smithy, then this new player is going to be really easy to micro because I mean he's not going to have like an ego or his own thoughts. He's going to have to he's going to be down to follow because he's subbing in. So that's why I was like, all right, like I kind of want to see Core step up and like carry this guy. Like they're freezing bot, they're bringing the jungler. Like that was a very classic Team Liquid play. It wasn't like double lift and Core JJ just smashing lane. It's usually they'll set up the wave in such a way that they'll call the jungler at the right time, and if you don't match that, you're kind of fucked. So they did that super well, and then I haven't seen that once. And obviously, like they're misplaying lane and stuff too. But no, I think Smithy did a really good job of like knowing where to be, and I think he was more integral to the team than maybe they thought, or maybe he was like understood.
I guess what confuses me is I'm not saying that Broxah isn't going to be an upgrade. But in a world where you're Team Liquid and you're the #1 team in NA and you have a lot of money and you can import literally anyone you want, is Broxah the guy you go after? That's what confuses me a bit. Was this really, if we think about it, the best move for Team Liquid? And we understand why that they went after him, because they're trying to change from having that more passive early game, moving to late game team fighting, and they want to trade it for some early game aggression and some good mechanics from Broxa. Now we can debate whether that's a good stylistic change for Team Liquid, but I'm just a little bit suspicious that they couldn't have gone out and picked up anyone else in the world.
I mean, I think the stylistic change actually makes sense, but they got the wrong player for it. So, like, Broxa is someone that, like, in EU at least has been really known because, like, also from playing against him, he's really, really good at following a game plan and executing it. That's his whole agenda, right? And he has not been able to actually aggressively impact the early game, like, unless they played G2 last year, they kind of, like, upped the tempo a bit, but it was only against G2 where he actually looked like someone that could actually aggressively play the early game. But against most teams, he was someone that, like, was almost, like, called upon to kind of stabilize everything. So he was kind of an ex-Smithy for Fnatic. So mechanical difference between the two players is really, really little. Like, I would say, for example, ex-Smithy is someone that has functional mechanics, I would call it that, where it's like he will be able to cancel your Jarvan EQ with Trundle Pillar. He will be able to do these kind of things that are, they seem so small, but they're actually really important for 2v2. So it's not like he's bad at executing those. And I don't see where Broxa has an upside compared to him, because Broxa is basically just an ex-Smithy just of Europe. So in my head, like, obviously junglers would have been, if junglers was on, they probably would have gone for him. But other than that, I think
I'll give you one. Here's the thing: the irony is this, Amazing. Based on what you're saying, if they wanted the stylistic change Monty wanted, it's actually the guy that replaced Brox at Southbade would have to be the player you'd probably get, right?
Yeah,
because Jakos isn't going to be available. You're going to have someone aggressive.
Yeah, you get Selfmade, you get Junkos, you get maybe a Chinese jungler even, like something like that. It has to be something almost out of this world, and I think, I mean, I also don't want someone like Broxa Hader, because I obviously respect him for success in Europe, and I do think that he's like basically an ex-Smithy light version, I think, and that is actually a huge compliment, because
Smithy
has been the winning jungler in NA, and I think Broxa has over the last 2 years or 3 years actually shown that he can compete at the highest level and be one of the top 2 junglers every single split. So it's not like he's not the aggressive player that they make him out to be, if that's what they're going for. Because that has never been the style, and it will never be, unless they put a lot of coaching into him. They change him up completely.
The big problem is this, right? As an outsider, who I don't claim to have like expert knowledge on the game, I feel like I know I can tap into where narratives come from before they get to Reddit, before they get even teams pick up on some of these, which is everyone's mind is warped by the 2018 World Championship, the games he had on Lee Sin. Because since in some of the games there he did pop off, people build him like they're saying, like, oh, he's this like aggressive player who in the early games going to. It's like, no, that was just in those games with Lee Sin. Like, if you actually watch him in LEC, I never really thought he was that kind of player. He was way more like for the team jungler and like whatever they're asking him to do. Never seemed like the guy who was making all the initiative moves and stuff and like making it aggressive. I never really saw where that came from. Actually, I don't really know why that's like the narrative around him.
Well, I think the question too is, the more we see Team Liquid play, the less it looks like Schernfire is the problem. So is there a positional battle that's going to happen within Team Liquid when Broxa gets here about who's going to be the best jungler for this team? Because Schernfire's been there, getting more stage experience, getting experience with Team Liquid. He's been shaky at times, but he's had some good games. Does this mean that maybe Schernfire becomes the starting jungler for Team Liquid after a certain point in time if Broxa doesn't end up working out?
I mean,
nope.
Yeah, impossible. I mean, I think, like, all right, so they've been
Mike Young, no? Mike Young on Academy?
Oh, Academy? Yeah. I think you're right. Let's not talk about that. But I don't know. I think if any of the team was interested in that prospect, we would have seen better jungle support synergy after these 3 weeks. Like, they've had 3 weeks to practice. Like, you should see some kind of growth. But when like Team Liquid is playing, like, you don't see that. Like, oh, this is really shored up now. It's like, I mean, this is just a mess of a team, and sometimes they can pull out a win, but it's not like, yeah, you can see them progress. And I think even like CLG has like some progression. I know they're still a really poor team, but you can at least see growth within 3 weeks. Like, even TSM from week 1 to now, it's like huge growth. So I think if they wanted to use Schernfire, if that was like a thought in their brain, we would have seen some kind of growth. It really seems purely like this is all like, let's just get through it. Let's get to Broxa, and then we'll like try hard again. That's what I'm pretty sure they're going off of. And I think like the pickup with Broxah, I think relative to Xmithie, I think he is more aggressive. I do think so.
My point is not that they would use Schernfire immediately when Broxah gets here, because I agree that there's a mentality here.
It means to only go back to him later.
It's like what happens if Broxah doesn't pan out when they are tryharding, right? That's my question. It's not in the short term. Absolutely, they will use Broxah. Even if Broxah wasn't better, I think the mentality change that Broxah being here adds completely changes everything.
Broxah's for sure better than Schernfire. I don't think I would discuss that. I think he's, for sure a lot better. It's more about, and even if he wasn't better, I think it's like kind of it's like the NA kind of brand situation where you have to use him because you bought him or you brought him out and he's kind of a brand. That's why you play him. So I think that may be more applicable in that scenario in case he was like only even or maybe even slightly worse for the team.
Like sunken cost fallacy. Like they spent all this time getting him and now he's here. Like if it's terrible, oh well, we're going to keep working for it.
What's Bang got to do with this? Oh, sorry. Did I say that out loud? My mistake, P0lly. My mistake.
I'm going.
That was pretty good, actually. That was pretty good.
Later.
All right, see ya.
Yeah, I got something to do. Yeah, I got an appointment.
See. I'll still admit. I'll still admit.
Probably.
Oh god.
I'll ask you a different question. Why do you think we're seeing such a small amount of Soraka and Sona in LCS when it has been really powerful in other regions? And I understand that Soraka is kind of like a win more champion, but she does so much and she's so strong right now, but we haven't seen the same priority on it in LCS.
I think one reason I think NA players are pretty slow. I know we mentioned like LCK slow to adapt to metas. I think NA is pretty close to how slow LCK is. So I think a lot of the players are not willing to want to change their playstyle because it is very weird, right? To play Soraka top compared to all like these bruisers, Aatrox and stuff like that, like it's a big playstyle change, and then you have to like play team fights differently. Like the whole team has to adapt. Like we no longer have CC top, we have a squishy top, so it's like it's a burden of knowledge that you have to figure out. I will say it's super worth it, I think. But I think in NA they're really slow too. Second thing, I think NA scrims, I'm basing this off of drafts I'm seeing. I think NA scrims people are playing like full prio, full aggro, and then games are like kind of exploding a bit. I think this is probably why you see Rumble is such high prio, because I think, yeah, they're just like stomping these lanes, and then they're like, oh shit, Rumble's OP as fuck, like, and then they don't learn how to actually play the champion or what it does like when they're behind. So I think every NA team or most NA teams are drafting these really, really strong early game compositions and not really these scaling or team fight focus, anything like that. Because obviously I understand it's easier to practice macro when you have, you can actually play in prio lane. So I understand it, but I think that's why we see like these Sin at Tom Kinches, and then they get out of lane phase and then they don't know what to do, or like they don't play aggressive enough to get these leads on stage. And I think with Soraka, it's another one where it's like, I'm sure when Soraka is being picked, people are playing like Aurelia and they're playing like all this like shit to like kill the Soraka, and then they're like hard camping it. So in scrims, they're like, wow, this champion sucks. It just gets camped. Yeah. And then they don't realize like on stage, no one's going to make these gigantic risks. Because if you fuck up once, it's just over. If you lose early game against Soraka, it's like good luck coming back, So I think, yeah, it's just getting stomped really hard. So it's like people aren't separating what happens in scrims to what will be stage play. And I think in this split, it feels like the most like the biggest problem NA has, where like I don't see any teams being like understand enough that like scrims aren't everything. And I think they're applying everything that happened in scrims as like, oh, this will happen on stage, and then they'll just have to replicate it.
So you don't think that level 2 flash cocoons on Elise will happen on oh my god.
That was a plague.
That was a plague. Oh god. I had to live through it for like a whole split where every time we scrimmed a certain team, it was like he's gotta take Hex Flash, what is it, like the Flash Traption? Yeah. He's gonna level 2 gank someone as Elise flash over a wall and then continuously uses his Hex tag afterwards. I'm like, I even at some point I wrote in all chat, are you gonna do this on stage, by the way? And I got the answer really, really soon, because he didn't do that on stage. There was no way.
And this wasn't one team, by the way. This is like a good chunk of teams would level 1 invade and their jungler would flash always to like burn a flash. And then they would level 2 gank with Hex Flash every game. I never once saw it on stage. ever. So all of
Why
our
do
scrims
teams
with
do
these
this?
teams,
Why do they do this?
our scrims are just fucked because it's like, all right, so mid lane has no flash, so mid lane's playing safe, so we lose mid lane now, and then now they're gonna go cheese gank bot at level 2 or some weird shit, and it's like now the game is really weird, but you guys don't play like that on stage, so it's like the progression of the teams is like stagnated. It's like we're just trolling really hard.
Yes,
And like, yeah,
yes.
I'm not sure what to do other than like I messaged the coach and I'm like, hey, do you guys want to chill out? Because the coaches aren't gonna. They don't want to tell their team like, hey, don't play so aggressive. But it's like, if you guys are doing so outlandish plays, but you can't do it on stage, then you need to like reevaluate how you're practicing. Because it's like fucking up our practice too. So it made
it was so bad. It was so bad.
It was really rough. And I mean, I'm really happy. Like Maurice kept it together, right? We didn't go insane when we were watching this like hex tech flash every game. Like me and Maurice are both like, we're not gonna practice this because this is not worth it. But jeez, it was so annoying to play against. I mean,
so here's a question: you have most of your coaching experience in Europe. Do you see these same shenanigans in Europe, or is this the NA practice virus?
no, I would see it in Europe too. I mean, I'd say like Perks and Caps were like probably like the two exceptions that did this, and I saw them do it on stage, but it made them such better players. Where I remember, playing against Fnatic, and it's like, oh, dude, I don't want to scrim Fnatic. Like Caps is 0-5, 5-0 every game. Like it's super unrealistic, but I think he did it on purpose, so he's able to actually grow. I think when teams are doing this in NA that I'm seeing now, they're doing it for like, I don't know, weird funsies, and it's not really like they're not hurting themselves. If they play it wrong, they're not like blaming themselves. Like, it just fucked up. I'm pretty sure when like Caps and Perks would play this like super ent style, they were like really taking it to heart when they would mess up and stuff, and they were really trying to improve. But in NA, it's just like, dude, lol, like, did you see I just got 3 kills in like 3 minutes? Like, isn't that awesome, guys? Like, I'm fucking a great jungler. Like, so I think that's the difference.
The coaches.
Or maybe the coaches, coaches like, high five, you got another first blood, man. Like, I don't know why it's so like, I don't see the transition on stage, and I don't see the player getting more aggressive. It just seems like they're just playing like mentally checked out, because it's more fun to just flash in and fight all the time, I guess. I don't know. It's hard. It's really frustrating.
Oh god. I'm getting flashbacks. It's
I
god.
can still see it. You're right. Because that was a good one. But Maurice brought up the first example was Elise Cocoon level 2 with Hextech Flash. So level 1, this guy is like flashing at you and forcing you to flash. Something really like, why is Elise flashing level 1? She has no CC. And then level 2, she comes with Cocoon. So like, she's Hextech out of the bush, and you're like, where'd this guy come from? And then he has like Cocoon. And if you flash the Cocoon, the game's just over. Now they lose.
Who are you scribbling against? Trick 2G or something? Is that one of those videos?
This was so like many teams.
5-minute lead or something like.
So many teams were doing this. It was crazy.
Still pains my soul. That's all I can say. It really does.
Like, our little bans and scrims would be like, we're banning like Camille, we're banning Jarvan, we're banning at least everyone who's gonna hextech douche on us. We're just banning it. So like the drafts were fucked, right? Like, they have so many power picks. We have power picks, but it's like at least they're not level 2 cheesing everywhere.
I'm loving this. This is hilarious.
What else was there? There was definitely something else. Like oh god. There were so many things that just annoyed the shit on me last year. It was actually incredible. I've never seen something like that. I was just like, every single scrim I could say like to the enemy team, hey guys, would you do this on stage ever? Like ever? And I was like, basically, I think the bottom 4 or 5 teams. I mean, we try to play the game right, but like I guess we just overstate our, like, we're just not as good, we're not good enough, whatever it is,
Yeah.
But like, I mean, there's so many other reasons it doesn't matter, but like, the bottom 3 to 4 teams, like, they ran it down every single scrim, and it was beyond belief. I just couldn't play the game. Like, on stage, we would actually dominate these teams because we had good win rates against the bottom teams, but in scrims, we had like a 1 to 5 win rate every single game, every single scrim set, because like these teams would be like, oh, let's just level 2 flip it, let's just flip it. Every single game is a flip, and I've never seen something like that. I was so frustrated. After scrims, I couldn't, literally, when I played solo queue, I actually got relief. When I played solo queue, I got relief from scrims, so I was like, players are not that random in solo queue. But then I met a couple again. And
Wait a minute. That alone is the indictment right there. That what you did is you were like, you know what? After a hard day of playing all those like scrims,
professional
just
scrims,
random coin flips, I'll just pop in an NA solo queue. Finally, some real League of Legends. Now let's play macro. Like, what sort of Twilight Zone episode is this?
Yeah. No, I still remember there's like moments where we're scrimming and like these games are just happening, and I'm like talking to the players. I'm like, all right, guys. Do you want me to keep drafting normal compositions, or do you want me to you guys just pick your own fucking champions and you just go ham? Because like if we play our normal style, we're not getting good practice. So if you guys want to enjoy yourselves a bit and like play against them, like I'm allowing this to happen. Just pick whatever the fuck you guys want. But most of the time, like no, like let's play real comps because it makes sense. I'm like, all right, we're gonna play real comps, but you're not gonna be happy about it. And we're playing these like normal, like okay, we have engage and stuff, and then they're playing like 0cc, like old school SKT Jana Rumble comp. That's what like they're playing and shit. And it's like, you guys will never pick this ever on stage.
So besides just complaining about it, get into the minds of those coaches. What do you think they were trying to accomplish with this?
Okay,
I don't know. Yeah,
I think it may have been. I think it may actually be something that like, I don't know how much pressure there is from the top down, right? Like maybe that's something that plays into it, where like, oh, if we win in scrims, you know, we can just pretend that we practice well, right? And then if we lose on stage, it's whatever, right? Like, so that could be something that plays into it, honestly, where they just pick this, give their players some comfort, give their players the ability to do something crazy. And honestly, they play for scrim elo to a certain extent in order to actually get a job next year, you know? I think that may actually just be it, as stupid as it sounds.
I mean, I just don't know if it's like the coaches have enough agency that they're the ones doing this, or if it's the players are like not willing to play losing lanes. Because I do know like in scrims, it is a really hard like topic to like convince a player like, all right, you're gonna be a punching bag this game. Like I remember we scrim against like Clutch, and like Huni's gonna play like Lucian, like Cassio, like Teemo, Vayne, and for some days like, I'm gonna have to be a punching bag all day today, aren't I? I'm like, yeah, I mean, unless you want to pick some weird shit we're not gonna play on stage, like you're gonna be a punching bag. And I think a lot of players are like they don't want to be the punching bag. It's not fun, especially like you're practicing 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day, and you're just like, this guy is just hitting me over and over again, and I can't do anything about it, like by myself.
I think
a lot of players don't like that.
Oh, I guess.
I love the concept that these players are playing for their jobs in scrims, i.e., because it's almost as if what you're saying is that they're intentionally picking weird picks so that they can dominate occasionally, so they look good, even though they would never do that on stage itself. But if they look good on these weird picks, it looks like they have a high ceiling or some level of potential that they will eventually, you know, break into. And so it continues, it just keeps the paychecks rolling in. But it is wacky to me that the staff members of these teams would not be able to independently evaluate whether that was effective or not, or a good way to win.
But you also have to like quantify the quality of actual NA coaching staffs or staffs in general, right? Like, I mean, this may sound really weird, but they don't have the same. I mean, they don't have the same kind of like up and coming like we do in Europe, for example. Like, I mean, I'm now an assistant coach, right? Like, I'm a strategic coach. We have Hando, who has been coaching like for 2 years now. I think in Fnatic Academy. Before that, he also had another team in Spain. He has learned for so long, and he's then a head coach. You see so many teams, like so many people in NA who are randomly becoming analysts, then assistant coaches, and suddenly head coaches of teams, and you never have like this kind of growth where it's like, yeah, this is actually how it's supposed to be run. This is how it's supposed to be working. It's legitimately just it's not nepotism. It's not. It's just legitimately.
Well, what's crazy about this Amazing is there isn't a region lock on coaches, so there's absolutely no reason why we have to have these people in coaching positions or in staff positions in these teams, because they have literally the entire world of coaches to potentially work with.
Yes. I mean, they do, and then they hire only Korean coaches, basically, or this guy. Who's
Not this time.
Yeah, but I think this ties in also to something that's different, because I'm always trying to quantify this myself. Like, I always find it so weird when you have, like, super duper EU players who go to LCS, and they're always making fun of it before they get there. And some of them don't do that well, actually. Some of them are like when Febiven was there, he was all right. Or at times he was good, times he was bad. So everyone always makes out like it's going to be easier, but it's just a different world. Because I think with coaches, you've seen loads of European and Korean coaches in LCS, and still barely any of the teams ever side lane. Still this 5v5 team fight in the mid. So there has to be some other element. Like the only thing I ever came up with is, because like everyone is so highly paid and there is so much scrutiny on every game, it feels like people in the game setting of like LCS match just want to play safe. They just go with the easier thing to execute. They don't try like basically being a more complete team. It's like incredibly short-term thinking in a way. I don't know how that would apply to this Scrim example though, because you would think in the Scrim example, you'd be harsher in that sense.
They're taking risks at least, or if you're going to play that way, you would take a risk and play that way on stage, even if it's not meta ideal.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's maybe the high stakes, but honestly, I think it is because the top teams in NA have continuously had similar similar styles all the time, right? So I think the only ones that have been trying to break the wheel, I don't even know, like I think it's been for a long time since like basically TSM has been continuously at the top. They have played a 1-4 dominant side, then they had TL. Honestly, I think TL may be the biggest reason why it's not changing. I think TL was so good individually that they could play the laziest style out of all, which is the 1-4 style, and get away with it every single game to win. And people thought of that then as the best style because we cannot beat it, thus it must be the best style. And every time they tried 1-1, honestly, because TL was so good, they could actually answer the 1-1 cards. You know, they could answer what's happening on the map, and then they grouped.
So everyone just follows the top team, basically. Is kind of like the analogy here.
Kind of, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Team Liquid was playing, they were just doing. We're gonna go to Dragon every single time it spawns. We're gonna push bot and go Dragon and fight. And if you don't fight us there, you're eventually gonna lose the game. So everyone had to learn, like, okay, we need to learn how to get like river control like they're doing. We need to like fight there because no one was talented enough to like 24/7 dive top or like hard camp mid or something. No one had this like individualistic style where they're gonna go hard in one direction. And I think the only one who kind of did it decently was like Clutch last year, where they're like actually playing a very strange style that like kind of fucked up a lot of teams because they're like
a weird counter for sure.
Yeah, they were doing like, I mean, the 10-minute Herald swap. I don't know how it took everyone so long to catch on, but like they were doing stuff like that, and they're like fighting in a lot of different ways. And like Huni obviously has like a lot of crazy picks, so they're like able to play a different style. So that's why like I'm kind of excited about C9 now, because C9 I don't see playing. They do the same thing every game. It feels a lot more they're winning like in the correct way that game, and it's not we're gonna take Dragon 24/7 and then that's how we win the game. It's like they've been winning in different ways. So I have a lot of hype for C9 right now, and hopefully that translates well to the rest of like North American teams because it's not just one style to follow now.
Oh, that's one thing I'll definitely give. Like in certain other areas, I critique Reaper a lot, but one thing I'll always give him credit for is the last 2 or 3 years of C9 teams he's had have been basically able to play most styles of whatever was viable in League of Legends. Like it never was just a team that won with one formula, as he's saying there. Like Team Liquid did, but they also won the league all the time, so everyone thought it was cool. Like it was. I actually always thought with Cloud9, it's pretty respectable. They always were able to play through all their players in theory. Never were just limited to like exactly what they're going to do every game. You don't really.
Well, it was like, yeah, right. Licorice comes in and they're playing like Camille when it was tank meta. Holy shit, dude. If I had a brand new player like that, I wouldn't take that risk. So huge props. And like Blabber, they're putting on like Kindred and stuff. And this is also another tank jungle meta. I'm like, I'm putting my jungler on Sejuani if he's a new guy, I'm gonna teach him some fundamentals. So I mean, I think Reaper's done a really good job whenever he gets a new player that he like really caters to their style and that kind of like integrates them into the team. And then he pulls them back into like, okay, now you're gonna learn tanks, now you're gonna learn this. So like that kind of formula he has, I think is really impressive.
I just always have a problem because I think C9 is a legitimately good team, but when they're just, stomping everyone, it's very hard to tell how good they are because there's very little resistance in NA right now, and the teams that we expect and have a lot of individual talent like TL are not performing well right now for, either lack of practice before the season started or motivation reasons for not having Broxa or whatever the answer is. We assume they're going to get significantly better. But considering everyone else in NA just seems really weak, and because they are weak and especially weak in their macro, Cloud9 is able just to run over them, right? And there's not a lot of resistance there, so it's really actually very difficult for me to tell exactly how good Cloud9 is, because I can say they're doing the right thing, but because the other team is not countering that whatsoever, they're just getting basically, knocked out in the first 10 minutes of a match.
I mean, the AD carry of Cloud9 has died once in 6 games.
Yeah.
So.
And it was a funny death. Like, like suicide bomb to kill him. Like, that was not a good play.
It's like he just wanted the accomplishment of being the one who actually got the kill.
Course.
Exactly, yeah. He was like, if I take nothing from this game, I will.
Yeah, at least, take your life once.
Exactly.
Now he only has 1 life before he breaks his KDA record.
So anyway, I'm just saying it's like, while I think Cloud9 is good, it is very difficult for me to evaluate how good they would be on an international stage because no one has even really challenged them at all at any point in time, right? In none of their games does it feel like they were ever losing.
I think TSM is going to challenge them if they still play them. Like TSM
They haven't played each other yet.
Yeah, they haven't played yet.
Yeah. TSM is the only team where I'm like...
It's the next game, actually, apparently.
It is,
next week.
Yeah, I can see this actually being like a real fight because TSM is the only other team that is both mechanically good enough to challenge C9, but they also have now started to find their own style within the meta, and they're a lot more aggressive than they used to be. So it's like C9 will just flat out counter TSM again, which used to be the thing in the past where they just get steamrolled by team fighting. I think TSM now is good enough at team fighting too, and they're actually playing lanes good enough. So I think that's the matchup I'm looking for. I think that's what kind of show how good they actually are, because all the TSM members are mechanically like top tier players. They would probably be top tier players in EU too, or at least like good enough to compete at the top.
So here's my problem with that. Amazing is that the teams that they've beaten have been Evil Geniuses, CLG, Golden Guardians, and Dignitas. And the Dignitas game, I think they had a huge advantage in the draft, and I think they played it well. To TSM's credit, like they knew what they had to do and they executed on it, and that is the one encouraging sign about all of this. But for the most part, they've been beating up teams that are in the bottom of the standings, and they also lost to TL. So my read on them is really kind of fuzzy right now as a result of that. And I think this week, where they actually have to play C9 and FlyQuest, is going to be the big test for them in this split, because we're going to learn a lot about that. But also there's the fact that everybody always has said, oh, well, it'll be different because C9, they're going to have a hard week in week 3. They play FlyQuest and Dignitas. Well, guess what? They just utterly destroyed FlyQuest and Dignitas. Mm-hmm. So I don't know about TSM. I think TSM's soft schedule has really benefited them, but I will say that I did like the way they played in the Dignitas game in particular. But they also had an advantage. So
no, I mean, I think they're playing out situations a lot better. So I have a lot more faith in TSM. It's again like not completely sold. Because I'll say like even C9 last week or before this week, I wasn't super sold on C9 yet. Because I was like, I need to see them more. But especially after like the C9 dig game, I was like, all right, these are really smart, correct plays. I think TSM's starting to get there. So I think next week will be a good test where we can kind of gauge it. But I think you're right. It's like TSM and TL really do have to step up to make this league competitive, to like be able to challenge C9, and those top 3 teams are going to have to dictate how NA is going to play.
I mean, I'm not sure that's true, because I think while we can say that TL and TSM haven't stepped up and they aren't playing at the same level of quality that we're normally used to seeing from them, we've also had a team like FlyQuest really step up and actually look pretty decent at times, and Dignitas I think has also really exceeded people's expectations. So my question is, do we really have a different number of decent teams in LCS? I'm not sure.
I mean, I think what we've seen so far.
What do you mean by decent? That's the question.
I mean, I think we have decent teams, but the thing is, like, yeah. So FlyQuest and Dig and stuff, I don't predict them in the long term to be like their growth to be linear. And that's how I predict, or I'm expecting TSM and TL. Like, I think that they'll start improving and keep improving, and they won't really hit a ceiling very quickly. The other teams I think are performing well, but I don't believe that they have that high of a ceiling.
I agree that Dig and FlyQuest probably have a high floor and a low ceiling.
Yeah. So that's kind of why I'm not putting like the burden on them to like help NA or anything like that, because I mean, if they do, that's awesome. That's really good for the scene and stuff. But I have much more expectations for TSM and TL to like actually live up to like what those players are capable of.
Yeah.
Actually, now thinking about it again, why do you think it is that European coaches are not really being taken into NA that often? No, but I'm serious.
I don't know.
I'm so curious about that, because
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I've said this on the show previously. One of the most shocking moves of all to me was when Youngbuck ended up on Excel of all teams in the offseason. Because as I've actually said on some of my shows, I personally went to some of the top orgs in NA, told them basically the things I knew from behind the scenes about how good he is at like working with players, managing egos. Like, I literally said, these are all the problems you guys always claim you have in your teams with the big superstar names. Like, this guy would be perfect. I even mentioned it to teams like TSM. So the idea that at the end, some of them end up with like an okay coach. It's like, oh, we'll try this guy. I don't know why they don't send a blank check to someone like that personally.
Well, it is kind of weird because Yamato also is somebody who, you know, we ended up with Pr0lly and Yamato not being in coaching roles.
Yeah.
And, you know, you would think at least they would be able to, you guys would be able to pick up assistant coaching roles at the very minimum. And you guys are doing broadcast work instead, and then we end up with a player like Youngbuck who definitely has proven that he can provide results, and he is off on XL probably being paid way less than NA teams would pay.
Certainly, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's really curious. Maybe it's because we're still like NA still fantasizes about the Korean coaching gods from season 4, season 5. Maybe that's it. Maybe they don't want to give as much agency to, like, I mean, the European culture is very, very different to NA culture, like, from what I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
It's entirely different where, like, it's really hard for any North American to tell a European person what to do because we're just not used to it. We have really flat hierarchies usually. So maybe that actually is an issue because they don't want to give someone that is more egocentric, more self-driven, like that much agency within an organization. Maybe that's just it. Because like Korean coaches, they will basically continuously answer to the top, like from the top down,
Sure.
right? Everyone who's above them they will answer to. Everyone who's below them is basically someone that will dictate, you know. So maybe that's it. But I mean, it's so curious to me. It's really curious to me.
Just leave it on that note. There's one of the mysteries of the world.
No one has an answer.
Good question.
Yeah.
Find out on the next episode of Sovereign Insight. Presented by AT&T.
I think that's a great place to end. So thanks to AT&T, Puma, Microsoft for everything. This show, please follow this channel. We're here 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central European time this year. We will be in the studio soon, next couple weeks, hopefully.
As long as I don't get Broxid.
As long as Thorin doesn't get Broxid. I will be in a studio soon, and hopefully some of our guests will be able to make it over as well, to be there in person, and we'll start kind of bringing you some more production, some more fun stuff that we're going to be doing. So thank you to everybody who watched. Follow the channel. Go to the YouTube. It'll be on Spotify and all of their podcast platforms in a little bit. And thank you very much for watching.